We're going to bring the Berlin Select Board meeting to order of March 11th. Where's that paper? It's over there again. Oh, wait, here it is. Open session public meetings are subject to being videotaped. Your image and voice may be recorded. Okay. Call the meeting to order at 7:02. We are just going to do the February 26th meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments, questions, changes?
I didn't.
I think my notes are for the right minutes, but there was only 1 minute in the packet.
That is correct.
Okay. Then I had just a couple of like typo type things. You want me to tell you what they are, or just give you later?
Yeah, and you can just approve of the corrections.
Okay. All right, so with the changes. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I also move.
Seconded. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. General public comment. First up, we're going to discuss the declaration of trust for the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. Lisa, you want to talk to us about it? Just give a brief overview or
Alright.
something. Or we could just go to it.
So at town meeting, we approved the housing trust and the basic, form of the housing trust. Going through the Mass Housing Partnership sort of checklist of the next steps for a housing trust. In order to deal with properties and those types of things, we also need to file a declaration of trust and file that with the Register of Deeds. So this is basically the next step in the formation of the housing trust.
Okay. Any questions?
I was gonna say through the chair, it's really a housekeeping item. That's the next, as Lisa said, that's just the next step. It has been looked at by town council.
Okay,
Yes, and when I was on with town council about transfer of property, this was another thing that I discussed with her, and she's like, oh yes, you have to do this. I'll talk to Kristen about putting one together. This is the result of that conversation.
okay. Questions? No, read through it and find the issues. Your motion?
I'm allowed to make the motion and always sit on the housing trust because I don't have any personal vested interest in any of this.
Correct. You have no financial
Right.
interest that would create a conflict.
Right, and I'm the select board. I sit on the housing
Liaison.
trust as the select board liaison, so
Correct.
so I'm fine to make the motion that we approve this declaration of trust.
Okay, do I hear a second? Seconded. And if there's no further comment, then we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you very much.
And then you'll need to sign, it'll need to be notarized, and then it'll come to us and same thing. So,
Okay,
thank you.
all right.
Ones for
Um,
the select board. to sign.
Actually, while you're here, and I know it's for later in the agenda, but on the warrant article last week, we were asked for the house that is, the housing trust is preparing to do what affordability is. I believe that they're looking at trying to sell that particular house for around 200,000 or so.
Wow, that is affordable
Which one?
The new affordable house
on Lancaster.
on Lancaster, that, well, the one that we're proposing for
Well,
town meeting.
That we proposed,
Right.
yeah.
The cost of the owner would be more than just cash because the owner would be expected to put some sweat equity into the building of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's something like 300 hours that
Right.
they have to put into either that or the restore. We can't actually say right now that it will be Habitat. We will write the RFP
Mhm.
and put that out so that, but we will write it in such a way that it is an affordable house that we're asking to be built. So typically you would get somebody like Habitat because another developer is not going to come in and build a house and then have it be $200,000. So
Other
odds are it will
companies
be
do that
Habitat.
too, besides Habitat?
I don't know of any.
don't-
We had Habitat in and spoke with them, and they've done several projects sort of in the area. So this seemed like a good fit for Berlin. You know, obviously it has that community aspect where we could potentially help with the build. It is a real live affordable house as opposed to a, well, it's kind of sort of affordable in this really narrow band.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a good fit for the housing trust.
So are parcels of land still subject to what you need to build a house in Berlin, like if there was a smaller,
Well,
less
this
than
is,
an acre
well,
land?
this would be a lip and this is smaller than 2 acres. So
Okay.
part of the reason that this is in tax title and hasn't been sold off is because it's not really suitable for something that a builder would want to come in and build.
Okay.
But Habitat and those types of organizations do something a bit smaller, so this would be probably about a 1,200 square foot house would be my guess. And they can do it as long as it's friendly with the town. We can say it's okay for you to go on this, even though it's a little bit less than 2 acres.
Okay.
So just so the board knows kind of the process and why it has to go out to RFP. So any disposition of town-owned property has to go through either a bid process or a request for proposals.
Mhm.
Typically with land sale, you select a request for proposals because the town can ask or put in parameters for what they're looking for that property to be used for. And you can rate and rank proposals based on how responsive they are to your needs and to what you're looking to use the property for. So, but it does have to be an open public process. Whether there are other groups that may apply, I don't know.
Yeah, and that would be great if there are. I'm not aware of any, but certainly if we get more than one thing and can evaluate, that's all to the good.
Mhm.
What about, I know it's skipping forward, Lincoln Road? That's 0.7 something acres on a house that's on the list. It's the old Legion Hall.
I mean, certainly anything that you think might be an option that we haven't looked at. There are a couple others on the tax title list, like 2 others that were potential, but they would need a little bit more sweat or skull sweat in order to see whether they were viable. We're pretty sure this one is viable. I did get something back I talked to Paul McKelk about whether there had been a perk test. Nothing formal, but an informal one was fine. So we would probably have to go through that process, but this one was sort of one that had been in mind before for this type of potential build. So we decided we go with the path of least resistance.
Yeah, because that building does have, or at least it has a well and it has sewer. How up to code it is, dunno, but.
Yeah.
It's on our list of buildings to look at to do something with, so that might be one worth.
I think that the idea of trying to get one going, you know, I think at a certain point, we might have the ability and capacity to handle other things happening, but the trust as we signed tonight is not super old yet, and so getting something that we thought would be easier to get through.
Yeah.
And have a bigger win and something to show the town, I think is good.
Yeah, and also just, choosing these sort of shovel-ready projects to, get going and have the learning curve and have the support that we need. Like if Habitat comes in and does the RFP, then, we know because of it's been successful in other communities and because of the process that they've gone through, that this is a very straightforward sort of thing to do.
Cool. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, absolutely. Any ideas or anybody who watches or whatever, if you have ideas for the housing trust, by all means, come by. The other one that we will be bringing in front of town meeting is, we're looking at doing a first time home buyers down payment assist program. So those who kind of fell into that, they were trying to buy an affordable home, but were having trouble coming up with that down payment, because that can be an issue because of where you can't get it from your parents, you can't get it from, certain other areas. It's possible that we could assist with that. So that would sort of broaden out the pool of applicants because they would have another mechanism to sort of make up the difference.
Nice.
All right.
Well done. Good job. Way to give back.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Any other questions?
Hurry before Scott comes up with one halfway out the door.
Well, Scott goes to the meeting.
I do. But I like backing up to make sure I say the right things.
All right. Next up is our police chief.
Good evening.
All right.
All right, so we'll start with old business. The antenna company showed up a week ago and they didn't have the proper equipment to climb the tower.
So
So,
they went home.
yeah, they went on to the next job. But obviously that night, we had the meeting, the select board meeting, and they approved the radios, so now the radios are on order as well. So it's actually probably gonna work out for the best because we'll get the engineers here all doing the same thing at the same time. So, see, in the month of January, we handled 1,031 calls for service, 24 cases involving criminal charges, 29 motor vehicle crashes, 9 reported to have injuries, 158 stops with 58 citations issued. On the plus side, Officer Davis is now off-field training, back on the schedule, which is obviously a big relief to the department because we're not filling as many shifts. Then the beginning of the month, we had 3 officers, Sergeant Andre, Officer Brusher, and Officer Davis, along with Berlin EMS, for their actions that saved a life. They responded to a call and were able to deliver 2 doses of Narcan prior to the medics arriving, and the person survived. In-service training has started for the department. If you see cruisers parked out in the parking lot, that's why, because they're on the computer, versus us paying them overtime to be at the academy. So it's kind of a win-win for us. We're saving thousands of dollars by letting them take calls and watch videos in between those calls. One of our part-timer officers that worked, when I say significant, 1,500 hours a year, just took a full-time job. So we wish him luck with that, but he's gonna stay on with us part-time. But now we're really down to 5 active part-timers who take shifts. I mean, we've had as many as 10. Now we're down to 5, so our numbers are dwindling on that end. ACO report was attached. And that was about it for January.
All right. Questions, anybody?
I'll go last.
You expect the number of part-time officers to continue to dwindle because the state is not sort of providing a good sort of incentive for someone to be a
Well,
part-time officer.
The ones that were in it for full-time have gotten their full-time jobs. We'll have our part-timers, based on age, and the age of 65, we probably got 18 years left with 3 of them and 25 years left with 1 of them. So, but it's still, they're all people that have full-time jobs outside of here too. So, day shifts are the hardest shift for us to fill. Used to be midnights, but day shifts are the hardest shifts for us to fill here.
And then you have 2 more that are in the process of getting trained?
Yeah, they'll be out May 3rd. So they'll be on the road first week of August, by themselves. If all goes well. Yeah. Which will be here before we know it.
Say that.
Yeah.
All right,
I'm fine.
okay. Peg?
Well, you stole 2 of mine, but that's goodness. So Chief, while the training's going on, how are things covered in town?
They respond to calls, they take breaks, not everybody can sit behind a computer. Not even myself. I spent an hour and a half on in-service today. And then I spent the next hour and a half driving around town because I was going bonkers over it. So if anything, I think we're actually picking up our patrols because we're appreciating being out on the road even more. Usually it's 2 working, one's in, one's out. So it's not like everybody's in and just buries themselves. Everybody keeps their normal routines and just fill in the blank with the online training.
I mean, obviously, there's an uptick in traffic coming up Crosby because of the bridge. You can tell by the condition of the road with that, but are you seeing any issues, people whizzing down Pleasant, up and around Crosby, having fun over there on the?
We've pretty much saturated Pleasant Street over the last few months. Not many complaints are even coming to my office. No emails, no more phone calls. I mean, I used to get them weekly, but I haven't heard anything in probably a good 2 months.
And in the center of town, is that blinky speed sign still up, or have I just not noticed it?
No, we had to take it down because National Grid put up their equipment on the pole. There's no equipment on the pole there.
So we can't put that back up?
Not on that pole, no.
Okay.
No.
Are we looking for a new pole?
Yeah, and I've got one down by I'm gonna call it the train stop because I don't know what it is now. But, yeah, there's a pole down by the train stop. I've spoken with Freddie. We're gonna run down there once some straps come in and we're gonna put it up down there.
That was an I had. See, easy peasy for you, Eric. You better hurry
I
up.
know,
and run
I'm
before
getting nervous. This is like,
Before I turn the page and
this is
see
like
what
6
else-
months in a row. I'm waiting for the hammer to come down.
But
I-
anytime you talk about progress on the radio towers and radio communication,
Yeah,
makes us happy. And so we're in a better mood.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm just, in one sense, I'm kind of glad that they didn't show up with a crane. Because now I'm hoping we can integrate the two projects together and save us thousands. Except they gotta be there anyways,
Mhm.
like, it's not gonna be a special visit, so,
Weird how
Yeah.
sometimes things work out for the better.
yeah. Yeah,
there
so.
Is there any support needed by highway or anything for any installation with them?
That the highway can support us with?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, good.
No. No, it's pretty intricate work. So. Yeah, if they had, there's no, the issue was on Cobra Road Tower, there's no steps all the way up, so they can't climb the pole. So the kid climbed up there and he couldn't make it the last 40 feet. Cause he didn't want to step on anything and break anything. He could have made it, but it would have been like climbing a tree.
No hiring monkey men.
Yeah, no,
Mm-mm.
no, so.
Through the chair,
Yes.
before you go, there's an overlap between our two reports. So since you're here, I thought I'd let you share the exciting news that we received last week regarding the radios.
Well, I think you should share it because you did a lot of work behind it.
You
but,
did too.
Um,
Just go like this.
Rock, paper, scissors, go.
yeah, so we got a call from, Representative Trahan's office. We did receive, the $400,000 to finish our radio project.
Nice.
Very nice.
Taxpayers appreciate
So
you.
does this bring
Thank
us to
you.
90%?
This does, so this brings us to, I believe what we said in the application was, once we put that third site up, it'll be
Yeah.
98.6
Yeah.
coverage. And I know
Yeah.
now you're looking at combining that tower with a few other
Yeah,
communities, and they really liked that sort of
yeah.
multifaceted approach.
Yeah, so we want to work with all the neighboring towns. That's one thing we've never done and everybody's had their own little fiefdom. And why are we spending $120,000 on a tower? Northborough spending $120,000, Boylston spent $120,000 when all three towns come together. Why can't we just have one tower and 3 radios on it? So, we're looking at that aspect, and I'm not a radio engineer. I don't understand. I don't speak their language. But if that doesn't work, then we have our backups as well. So without spending $120,000 on a tower, that's our
And
biggest
maybe they'll
goal.
do the same
Yeah,
at another point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So that's our goal is to obviously not touch the taxpayer money and get the best bang for our buck.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. You looking for alternative ways to find money instead of just to spend.
And it's been a while since we applied for this, so just as a refresher, this was applied for the FY 24 budget, and we were this was actually fall of 22, I
It
think?
was a long time ago.
Or spring,
maybe
it was a
longer than
very
that.
long time ago
Yeah.
because it was in preparation for the FY 24 federal budget, which has been piecemealed along, as everyone knows, for the past several months. And so, we did receive the call. We were supposed to know in December, but we did receive the call that this specific piece of legislation was signed into law with the Biden pieces that were signed over the weekend. This is part of what is known as the federal community funding projects that the congressmen and women get to put forward. So Congresswoman Trahan's office, or Congresswoman Trahan represents 35 cities and towns. Each town could put forward 5 projects, and she selected 15 projects to move forward. Now, I don't know of those 15, how many actually got selected, but we were one of those 15 to move forward. So it's the first time Berlin's applied for that funding. So they were excited to have the opportunity to work with us. And they loved the regional component of it. And also the fact that, the little scary fact that our radio system is operating with 1980s technology and equipment purchased used off of eBay and installed in 2004.
Only in
So,
Berlin.
Hey, don't knock eBay. You
Hey,
get good stuff.
Great. That was probably a great purchase.
At the
taxpayer
time.
dollars as well, because
Sure.
that was,
Didn't
oh, it's
have
something
Facebook
cheap and it's
Marketplace
lasted
back
us
then.
20 years. I think that was a great investment at the time as well.
Facebook
So-
Marketplace now.
Mhm,
Yeah.
that's right, free cycle.
Right, but the fact that public safety personnel are resorting to cell phones
Right.
to relay that information, and you have so many gaps in communication, you know, that not only impacts response times, but that puts public safety personnel in jeopardy. So that this is really a multifaceted approach. Phase one was the antennas. Phase two, you approved last week for the repeaters and the filter component of it. And then this will do that third site to give the coverage on the south side. And bring us from, I think we're at about 50% right now,
Around 57.
coverage. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Depending
bring
on
us
the
up over
weather.
90.
Some
So-
areas of town better than others, and
Some days, other days, you know, it's like your cell phone, you know, some days it works in one spot, next day it doesn't work, and it's all atmosphere conditions and weather, and so we're trying to cut Mother Nature out of it,
yeah,
so.
well,
Yeah, I mean, phase three is gonna be a little bit more complicated, may take a little longer, but, you know, it's basically tying phase one and two together and, you know, making it successful.
And
Might
also
be-
I'm sorry.
No, go.
I was just gonna say, as we mentioned last week, we're able to hop in on the fiber that's coming in on the telephone lines from Tohoto. that's-
Tohoto, yeah, so we're gonna be able to put, with phase three, we're gonna be able to put our repeater at Tohoto as well. So we'll have full radio coverage when we go to Tohoto.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it'll all come back fiber optic. We'll come back on the fiber optic line, so we're not gonna rely on microwaves or any of that stuff. It's just gonna be a direct feed right back here.
Might be a nice write-up for the item.
Mhm.
Nice plug for you, the other towns. Congresswoman Trahan.
Yeah.
Benefit to the town, safety.
Think she'd come out if we invited her?
She's going to come out
Oh,
and
good.
they were gonna do some type of project kickoff at some point. I think they were just waiting for everything to get finalized over the weekend, and then we should hear from her office.
Mhm.
And in fact, I believe she's gonna call personally, and that's very exciting, and we'll get to plan something out. So
Do you have a hand in that? No.
I did help get her elected though.
So kind of, sort of, yes.
Yeah, so like I said, we're grateful, doesn't hit the tax base, and we're looking at spending what, 750,000 on radios, and doesn't, well, I mean, we all pay federal taxes, but you know, we basically got a tax refund back.
Life expectancy-ish.
12 to 15 years.
Nice.
That's unlike the one that's up there now, it's 30. You know, which they still, it's amazing when the radio techs come out and they take pictures just to have them on their phones. Cause it's like going to an antique car show. They're just amazed, absolutely amazed.
It works, kind of.
Yeah.
Cool.
Put it in a glass box and sell it back
Yeah.
on eBay
Yeah,
to
exactly.
somebody.
You might even be able to sell on eBay for more than you bought it for.
Uh,
because
is
now
it-
it
yeah.
antique and
vintage.
Yeah.
Vintage and
Yeah,
I think
Alright.
80s technology is 40 years old. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
What's 80s technology is manufactured, I think, in 92.
Okay.
92 or 90, what's it didn't change.
Yeah.
Didn't change until close to 2000.
Yeah, we're good.
Well,
That's
thank
great
you
news.
Well
for
done.
all of
Thank
your
you.
hard
Thank you
work,
for both of you.
both of you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Alrighty,
All right, is that it?
Yep,
That's
that's it.
it.
Yep.
and we'll move on to the town administrator report.
all right. So I'd like to start by just taking a few minutes to talk about the FY25 budget process. We've talked a lot in our meetings about finalizing the budget on our end. We've had sort of this outstanding factor of Berlin-Boylston Regional School District and what their plans are. And this is going to be, at least for the first time in modern history, if you will, we are going to have two budgets on the town meeting warrant. And so I wanted to take a moment to just walk for the viewers and for everyone who's here, walk everyone through what the process has been this year. So there's some understanding of how we arrived at where we're at. So if you'll indulge me for a moment. Typically what we do is we have 2 hearings with the regional school district. We have a preliminary one in December, which we did have, and we received only an above level services budget. So we were looking forward to our meeting in February, where we were hoping to receive, typically we get an above level and a level. We kind of go back and forth, settle somewhere in the middle. And obviously last year was a extraordinary year in terms of percentages and expenses. There were a significant amount of last minute unfunded mandates, if you will, on special education. That resulted in each school going up approximately 9%. And obviously that was felt by the taxpayers in approximately a $600 increase on the average single family homeowner, which is quite substantial, more or less, depending on the value of your home, which last year was the average single family home in Berlin was valued at $550,000. This year it's jumped to $650,000. So it's actually gone up $100,000 for FY24. So when we look at FY25, it'll be interesting to see where we're at there, but you're kind of facing 2 factors, not only the increase in the budget as a result of what was approved at town meeting, but also rising home values, which increases the taxes as well. So it's kind of a double whammy. And we did some very creative last minute budgeting last year to make it work. We did put $382,000 of free cash into the budget as one-time funding, with the understanding that some of these unfunded mandates that get reimbursed a year in arrears would be picked up and reimbursed a year in arrears, and we wouldn't have to include them in the FY25 budget process. So I was a little bit shocked when we did receive the budget finally. And the budget does include a 21% increase at Berlin Memorial School and an over 18% increase at Tohoto. And a significant amount of this increase does come from those above level services requests. I think what's been challenging is that the school committee has said they've adopted a new process this year with a consultant from Mars, and they didn't want to give out any numbers until they were closer to final. So we've pushed our processes back so that, we could accommodate. Unfortunately, we have yet to have the district before the FinCom this year. They did decline to attend both their originally scheduled and rescheduled hearings in March before the FinCom, and they have declined to attend the Capital Planning Committee meeting on March 14th that was scheduled specifically to review their late submittals. And just for reference, capital submittals are due October 31st, and that we did not receive a formal proposal until this past Tuesday, March 5th. According to the district, the town will receive their final budget on March 20th, which is 2 days before the deadline of March 22nd to submit the budget. This unfortunately does not allow any time for discussion between the town and the district to attempt to arrive at a number that works for both entities in light of limited available funding. We've delayed our budget process on the town side by over a month to accommodate the late submittals from the district, as we recognize the critical importance of providing funding for our students. However, the lack of information and refusal to attend meetings, coupled with a completely different and honestly less transparent process used by the district, has made arriving at a coordinated budget impossible. So for the first time, there will be 2 budgets on the town meeting warrant: the district budget we receive on or before March 22nd, and the FinCom recommended budget, which includes a 2.5% operating budget increase for the district over FY24 for a total increase of $178,270. This has been provided to the district, and it leaves over a $2.1 million deficit as the schools are requesting those significant increases that I just told you about. I am unsure at this time as to how the capital committee will proceed. They've been given a list of projects without descriptions or supporting quotes. so they can understand which project, what each project entails. The total requested capital funding is $1,596,807. For reference purposes, the town's free cash policy only allows 30% of free cash to be used for capital projects, which would be $533,000, and that's for both school and town projects. So the school's capital request is 3 times more than our total available funding according to our recommended free cash policy. I'll just throw in my little plug. I'm a proud local public school grad, Leicester High School, class of 2000. I have a sincere value for public education, and my desire to give our children the very best and prepare them for the future could not be more of a priority. I've expressed my frustration with this process to both the school administration and the school committee in hopes that the district will change their process moving forward and begin to work with the town again, as their failure to do so is extremely disappointing and detrimental to our children and the community. So I spent a long time really thinking about how we got here. And so I thank you for letting me read that, because I think it's important that the taxpayers understand it's not that the town does not want to provide funding. It's that without the proper information, we are unable to provide that funding. And there is a lack of transparency between what is an above level services request and what is actually needed to keep level services with perhaps a little bit additional based on any sort of mandates. So I'll pause there for a moment. I know that was a lot of information. If any of you have anything you'd like to add.
So just as a process question, are we wanting to discuss then the school budget situation sort of here, or when we get into the budget portion of the meeting?
Either or. But I
Okay,
think
either.
I think we owe it to either the people here and the people
Right.
watching to understand what will be expected, potentially expected
Yep.
of them at town meeting. But as I was looking for information through the multiple town reports, trying to find the percentages that refute the claim that's going around that Berlin always shafts the schools and doesn't give them what they want. In the town report of 2021, on page 65, if anyone wants to fact check me, the head of the committee wrote, the schools committee's first priority in the development of its annual budget is the education and welfare of the children in our schools. Concurrently, the committee attempts to balance the valid interests of the taxpayers. This requires the school committee to work with district leaders to discuss funding, priorities, and cost drivers with our communities to solicit their input in response to the proposed budget, as well as work with the finance committees in Berlin and Boylston to discuss and fine-tune budget recommendations. That was 3 years ago. That's what they were doing back then. Unfortunately, the school committee, my own personal opinion, not Scott's, Kristen's, anybody else's in this room, epic failure for them to look at this piece of paper that went out to every person in town and to do the complete opposite. It's a shame. It's an absolute shame and sham. So again, fact check, town report 2021, page 65.
And that was from the school committee?
Yes, that was written by the
Okay.
head of the school committee at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I can speak from about 1998 for the next 15 years as I was on the board. And I felt as though the town was fair and was able to fit the school budget into the town budget. And if there was something that I may have disagreed with, I got up on the floor at town meeting and asked for the additional $10,000 or, $1,200 or whatever it was that we were in dispute about. And if I could make my case, people on the floor voted for it. So.
yeah, I mean,
I
if
was
you're,
gonna say, sorry.
no, go ahead.
But, on FinCom also for 9 years where we worked on the school budget, I felt that for many of those years, it was a collaborative effort. It doesn't mean we always agreed, but we got the budget early. One of the things is that it is hard to figure out when the schools are 40% of the town budget. It's hard to figure out what money might be available for the other departments. If the schools come to a budget early and are very high, sometimes we look at other departments internally so the schools can get some of the money they have. When they give their budget 2 days before it has to go to the printer, there's no chance of that. The police are already beginning to think about what, the budget, we've sort of already agreed to the cuts they're already thinking of doing. There's not a town department, I think, that wouldn't love to have some more money to do some justifiably beneficial activities for the town
And needed.
and needed activities for the town. So we don't always end up with 40-year-old radio communication towers that hurt our ability to respond to pieces. And I want to remember the March 22nd date you talked about is the day we're supposed to have this to the printer.
No,
Okay,
March 22nd is 45 days before town meeting, and according to the regional agreement between the district and the town, that is the date by which they have to submit a final budget.
right, but then.
So they can't, it's not to be
Right.
changed after.
Right, but we have to get things to the printer pretty close thereafter.
Yes, we do. So it has to be to the printer, I would say April 1st, because it needs to be printed and mailed out no later than April 12th.
Right, and after we have the final numbers, there's still things to do, like even layout things to do before it gets, it's not like you can get a number and 15 minutes later you're at the printer.
Correct.
I mean, and you look at years past, and again, this is all taken out of all the town reports. The table was covered with them over the weekend. Berlin Elementary in,
Berlin Memorial.
sorry. I'm a graduate. I can call it Berlin Elementary, but I know it's Berlin Memorial. FY 22 budget was 4%. Boylston Elementary, 5%. Tohoto, 4%. There was one, where was it? Which was a 6% increase. 6.2, the FY 21 approved budget had an increase of 6.2% for Berlin Memorial over the prior year. So the scuttle going around of, we don't do anything for the schools is just a total fabrication of misinformation that is out there. And that's why either now or later during the budget, we have to be absolutely clear what is expected of people who attend town meeting, because I don't want it to be battle royale on the floor there as to what to do and what information needs to get out. I just have a feeling that it's going to be one set of information goes out, this is the truth. Another set of information goes out, that's the truth, and somewhere truth lies in the middle. So as this board, we need to get that out there. And what is it going to cost to me as a taxpayer if this budget in its entirety, the school budget, operating budget passes in its entirety? What does that mean to me? And what do I need to start cutting out of my budget to make sure that I can pay my taxes to the town?
Do we, as of right now, have a school budget with a number on it?
Yes.
We do have a school budget, both capital and operating.
It has not been passed by the school committee. It has been discussed at the budget subcommittee.
So there's not a scope that even the school committee has even seen yet to have an opinion on.
They have seen it once, from what I understand. I'm sorry, twice, but they have not taken final votes on the budget.
Was today the day that the superintendent expected the three principals to come forth with potential budget cuts? Do we know if that happened?
I do not know. I can check.
Town bylaws has to deal with budgets, and I'm going off my head. I did not actually read this, so I'm fine to be corrected at some point. Is that budgets are due by, I thought, either December 1st or January 1st. And we usually, schools are generally, but I think the bylaw says that if we don't get a budget on time, we are allowed, as FinCom is allowed, and the select board tends to follow that, is allowed to level fund the budget. And so we would be within our own bylaw rules to both, as the proposed budget and the recommended budget, 0% increase to the schools, where they would not even have the opportunity on the floor to ask for more money. I'm not proposing that. 'Cause
yeah.
I think that's draconian, but that is
Right.
within our rights to do.
It is to present a FinCom budget and a school budget. The school is allowed to put their budget on the warrant always. However, in what shape they want to put it in, and then the town can propose that alternative FinCom recommended budget that could be level, could be less, could be more.
I'd like to look into that more. I
Okay.
don't think that is what the town bylaw says is a process.
I think, okay, I thought that was in the regional agreement, but let me look at it a little bit more.
Okay.
So do we want to talk about the process now or wait till we go into, to numbers?
Process for,
Well, again, because the terms that you hear bantied about was very out there in the public, at the last Berlin-Boylston Regional School District was, we'll just do an override. Override,
I don't think that they're interested in doing an override. From what I
And-
heard at the March 6th meeting.
We also, but because we've been fiscally conservative a town, we could raise taxes by 1.6 million and not legally be required to do an override. And so because we've not done an underride to lower that number, we have excess capacity that would not require an override. I think as a select board, we're allowed to require an override over a certain amount. But,
Yes.
but one is not legally
Kristen is
required.
looking into that.
Right.
Right. We did receive confirmation from DOR that although you have excess levy capacity, and all that means is that you can tax more. It doesn't mean that we have that money sitting in a bank somewhere. So when you tax more, people pay more. So just to clarify that, or you can do what's called an override, and that means that people's taxes go up permanently by whatever percent increase that is over the 2.5% that we're allowed to increase the budget by every year. So that's Prop 2.5, which when people hear about 2.5, that's the 2.5% is the cap that you can go by unless you pass an override. Well, there's new growth, but I don't get into all that. But the problem or the concern that I have is you should have the opportunity as voters to come out and look at this information and make the most informed decision possible. My job is process oriented and recommendation oriented. I don't have a horse in the race. I'd love to say I lived here, but unfortunately I'm just a stone's throw away in Marlboro. So my job is really to stay out of the politics part of it. But what I can tell you is typically because an override is a two-step process, it's town meeting, and then it goes on a ballot question. So people actually come to an election and vote for it during whatever hours the election runs, whether it's 12 to 8 or whatever the normal hours are. You give more people the opportunity to make that decision. And I feel that that is a fairer process, as opposed to just, doing a one shot off at town meeting, looking at excess levy. So my recommendation, because this would have a substantial impact on people, is to allow the greatest number of voters to make that decision for it or against it. But people need to be able to have the opportunity. The problem with town meeting, it occurs on a weeknight at 7:30 in the dark. There are people that don't drive in the dark. There are people that have sporting events for their kids. There's all kinds of people work. There's all kinds of reasons why people can't attend a town meeting and sit there for 3 or 4 hours. When you have an election and it's open all day long, people can come at a time that works for them. So that would be my recommendation, would be to do an override, because I do think it's the most fair process.
what would be required of the town to do that? You mentioned to get it on the ballot.
So 35 days before the annual town election, we could put it on the ballot. It does take a vote of the select board. The select board is the only body that can put an override on a town meeting warrant and put a request to the town clerk to put it on a ballot. If for some reason it's not within that window, you can also hold a special election just for that. But there's additional cost with holding a separate election, and given the time of year, obviously we can get it on the annual town election. That would be ideal.
It would be ideal. However, you'd do it 35 days out
Correct. But we will have the budget, the final budget,
No matter
45
when.
days out.
if they
So
request it.
Yep.
I
We-
think they are skeptical of whether or not an override would pass, is what I've been hearing.
We all love PEG math, but I'm going nowhere near this, because I want it to be correct. And I always round, and I generally round up,
And don't count pennies.
and don't count pennies. And that's why I don't have a job with the town accountant, because she won't let me. Is it possible to give an example, like with a $10 base or something that people could understand, because people hear the words, but at the end of the day, I want to know where it's gonna hit me and
Mhm.
how much is it gonna be, so. And if not today, then at another meeting, but I'm thinking that would
I
help
think that would
drive
be a
it.
good
home.
thing to
Yeah.
answer at coffee talk or something.
I mean,
Well,
one of
and
the things
again-
is that whether or not it's an override, any increase in spending is increase in taxes.
Mhm.
And so if the school budget goes up by 50,000 or 100,000, 200,000, or whatever the number happens to be, each one of those increments is more money that everyone in town pays.
Do you have a number-ish, if the budget passes in its entirety, what the impact will be to every taxpayer in town?
I
Our
do.
budget that we have with,
The budget that we have before us, whatever budget that is, whether it was the one 2 weeks ago or
are you talking about the school?
the
or
school budget,
town?
the school budget.
Well, they haven't given us anything.
The
So it would
preli-
be the one that we put forward.
the preliminary one that the school provided, because again, we have our town budget.
That
And-
was at 18% or something and.
Yeah.
And,
Yep, so.
Yeah, so it's 18% to Honto, 21% BMS.
right,
I can speak a little bit to it, but it comes with a whole lot of caveats. So I just want to put out there
Mhm.
that this is an estimate, this is based on 24 numbers, and it's not been run through the split tax rate, which messes everything up. So am I forgetting any caveats, June? Thank you. Estimate only. There is a property tax calculator on the state's website that you can use. And anyone can access it. I was just gonna see if the URL isn't 500 million pages long. But if you go to the, Google the DOR, which is the State Department of Revenue, and it's called I believe it's called a property tax calculator. It's a little complicated because that 2.1 million that I spoke about is a mix of both capital money and operating money, which come from two different sources, okay? So let's just talk first about the operating deficit. Now, the operating budget is obviously not capital items. That's basically what you use to operate the school, which is mostly personnel, right? Because you're funding mostly teachers. So what you're looking at for an operating budget deficit is 2 million, based on current numbers, 2,371,900 total, okay? For both the capital and the operating. And I'm just looking to see where I put my operating number. Sorry, give me 1 second.
and this is for which school?
This is total for the
Mhm.
district.
Both, okay.
Yep. And sorry, I'm doing this a little bit on the fly, so bear with me.
And that's kind of why you really can't expect her to come up with a number.
No, and that's why I absolutely said that if not tonight, then in another meeting, but this has to be an ongoing on the agenda every single meeting and at coffee talk. It just can't be once. Because again, 3 people show up to coffee talk, 25 people don't. All 28 show up at town meeting. Who's
Well,
got the
then
most
maybe you better
information?
be advertising the fact that you need to tune into
Well,
our
and
meetings.
that it is a hard number to decide,
Correct.
because when we come up with a budget, that's just the beginning of the tax process. There is what the value of the town is, what new growth ends up being certified for, how much we apportion to
Right.
residential versus commercial, the value of your house over the period of time relative to
Yeah.
other values of houses. This is why people think that it's a relatively easy thing to say, well, there's the town budget is $3 million. There's 3,000 houses in town. That's $1,000 a house. It actually doesn't work like that. I know it's pretty good for Peg Math.
That was very good for Peg Math.
Uh,
I am impressed.
And why it's just not easy to say that adding another police officer adds $5 to your taxes,
Yeah.
because it's just not that simple.
And it might
And
be-
if a big commercial building suddenly becomes vacant and the
Right.
commercial value goes down, then the budget could stay even and your taxes could still go up.
And it's a little easier to say, it's going to go up $600 if you have an average priced home, which
Right.
is
Mhm.
X.
Right.
That's
Assuming
about
we
all
don't
you can
mess
do.
with the
Right.
commercial residential balance and assuming the commercial properties don't change much in value. Do we buy you enough time?
Very close. Say one more thing.
So levy capacity is not a bank account.
How about, we gotta make sure that we gotta tighten this up for coffee talk in a few weeks and get it out there. And
Yep.
as you said, maybe it goes on the agenda next week that we start brainstorming how to get this information out, whether they're leaflets, you hang out at the transfer station, you drop something off at the general store, 19 Carter, wherever. But this meeting, I think, is super important for people to be extremely well
Right.
informed, because you just don't want the audience packed
And-
one way or another.
And unlike a vote on the ballot at town meeting, although you're presented two budgets, one will be the recommended from us and FinCom, and one's likely recommended from the school board. You can end up with a vote that's anywhere between those two numbers. And so on the floor, there could be compromises made at a number that's somewhere between there.
You did good. Okay, so a little math on the side. And again, all the caveats, especially also that this is only preliminary, these are only preliminary numbers that we've been given. They have not been voted on by the school committee. The operating deficit right now, and I'm gonna do a little peg math.
Now, when you say deficit,
The difference between what they've asked
what
for,
they've asked for,
and
not
what
what
we're
they have.
recommending giving them.
So you're
for
not
an
really
increase.
cutting actual things that are there.
Correct. Well,
What they do,
You're
they're.
only cutting things off of paper.
Whatever they do with the money is up to the school board. And so the difference
Right.
between the 2.5% that we are generally recommending between the select board and FinCom and whatever number the school board's preliminary number before they put in some cuts, and some years cuts are real and sometimes they say that cut and the number comes back higher, like last year, is about how much?
so the difference is 1.24 million
Mhm.
and then change, but I'm
Mhm.
gonna round, because I actually like rounding too. And when you put that into the calculator for FY 24, the average single family home in Berlin right now is valued at $653,359. So you can adjust up and down depending on the value of your home. The current average single family tax bill is $8,330. This is based on FY 24 annually, correct? Now, I haven't done the math for what the normal increase would be, because we go up 2.5 every year. So there's already a little bit of a base increase, right?
Mhm.
If we were to fund just that 1.24 million, okay, that represents somewhere between $700 and $800 additional a year. Plus the little bit that goes up, it goes up a little bit anyways.
Mhm.
So I would say, and
In
again,
case your house has been looked at again and reevaluated.
well, and especially because the average single family home last year was $100,000
Right.
less than it is this year. So your bill's already going up right there because values have gone up. I mean, I would say just on the operating side, to be safe, you're talking somewhere between $1,000 and $1,200. If you were to include that 1.24 million. Now it gets further complicated, because if we start to talk about capital, we are short, I'll just call it short. We're short about $1.1 million for a total of 2.3 million, as I mentioned, that we're short overall. Capital does not get raised in the same way as the operating budget does. Capital goes through a process of what's called a debt exclusion. A debt exclusion is not a permanent increase to the taxes, but it is an increase for however many years you finance those improvements over. So it's like a car loan or a mortgage or whatever you want to call it. Usually it's a 20 or 30-year borrowing. And for that period of time, your taxes go up by that amount, and then they go back down. But 20 or 30 years is a long time. So
it's not
your
gonna really
taxes are
affect it.
well, right, because it's also values are going to increase in the meantime. It's 2.5% a year anyway, whatever. But it's not a permanent reset to the tax rate.
Mhm.
It's only for as long as you're financing those projects. So if you figure another 1.1 million for that on top of that, if I throw just 1.1 million into my handy dandy little calculator here, that's somewhere around $650. Like more,
So you're looking at a $1,800 increase-ish?
ish.
Estimate only, estimate.
I wish I had like flashing red lights right
Yeah.
now that say estimate, yeah.
But this is the part of the discussion that the school committee does not have. They, and I'll call it again, I do not speak for the board, I only speak for myself. They fearmonger. Which is what? Fearmonger.
No, who's they?
The
School
school
board.
committee. Members of the school committee that I will not name, but have done so in a public meeting of, oh my God, just cut people now. Just tell me how many teachers I need to cut, or we'll increase class sizes.
Oh, they're doing fear monger to,
The
the public.
public,
Okay.
yes. So, oh my God, we need to cut how many teachers and let's just increase the size of the rooms. We have plastic tables here, just go put them in the room. Kids won't have their own desk. That's the part of the message that we need to start rebutting and say, if this is, if, and all these estimates and other items that are in here, each taxpayer in Berlin could potentially, estimate only, look at conservatively an $1,800 increase in their taxes. Ish, estimate only. That's what needs to get out.
Well, and I'll give you an example because at the school committee meeting at I think it was not the March 6th, but the one that happened at the end of February, the 27th, maybe. Boylston is also short by about $850,000 just on the operating side. So they're not all that far off from us. They have a little more growth in their community because they've brought in some business. So they're a little bit better in that regard. $850,000, a lot of that is what you would call above level services, new things that you're adding to the budget. It was presented as, well, how many teachers will we have to cut to make up $850,000? Well, and Nancy's doing math on the fly. It's like, well, that's 10 teachers. The chair of the Boylston Select Board aptly pointed out that it's not override or lose 10 teachers. It's override or cut above level services funding. And I thought that was a really poignant point to point out. So if anyone's interested, that was a good meeting
and
to watch.
above level services. I mean, the number that he was speaking of is the amount over.
Above and beyond.
Beyond what the state has said, this is what you need to pay.
No, it's actually above and
Above
beyond their
their-
current budget.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. I thought you were going in a different direction.
No. So I guess my point is that I just want people to understand that it sometimes is a way to present information that, is not always entirely accurate, right? Because you're not saying I'm going to cut existing. If your above level services is somewhere between 600 and, so say it's only 500 or 600,000 of that is above level, and say 300 of it is level. That's not the same as saying I need to cut 10 teachers.
Well, and this is where the lack of discussion and information comes into play, because the school could turn around and say, again, making this up, I need 10 teachers. Based on population, special needs, blah, 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 blah. Here's your list of 20 reasons why. And then both towns could almost counter and say, well, how about we give you this? How about you cut this? We'll give you that. There's no room for negotiation.
There's
It's
no time now.
No,
That's the
there's an
problem.
11th hour.
Yeah.
Here you go. Here's my information. Thanks. You have a great day.
That was usually we started in early February and went to March when I was on FinCom. The schools did a preliminary budget in February, and and we would share with the schools saying, look, between new growth and 2.5, we have total this in the budget. Here's the other things in town that we need some money for, like our health insurance has also gone up, our retirement funds have already gone up. And we go back and forth, and sometimes it's like, okay, we've agreed this year we're not adding another police officer to the town so that we can have a little bit more money for the schools this year. And they're like, okay, we've agreed. And you're right, we don't have any of that, because if their budget's coming out, 2 days before the end of the process, there's not time, even if everyone was willing, and even if everyone had 48 hours to sit in a room to get all that done, because we have other department heads that are trying to plan out their year. There's other staff that have other things on it. I also, we need to point out that we have no control over what the school board does with the money. At the end of the day, the town apportions $1, and where the school makes their cuts and doesn't make their cuts and allocates those money is totally up to the school board. And so if people are upset that the school board is deciding to cut teachers instead of something else, then they should, run for school
Voice,
board
right.
and base that to the school board, because the school board, I bet there'll be tough decisions. But that doesn't mean that it goes, I sadly, when I went to college 40 or so years ago, but my public administration class talked about the Washington Monument defense that was used a lot in the 80s, that whatever the national parks were told they had to not get all the increases they wanted, they would threaten to close down the Washington Monument so that people would, yell and scream and say they needed added money. And I think added school rooms and cutting teachers is where they
And
go for
buses.
that.
Cut a
Mhm.
bus,
Yeah.
you get the whole rooms full of parents.
Well, and I've seen where overrides have failed on the town side before in my, years of service here, in local government. And the worst thing in the world is to say, well, if you don't pass this override, we're gonna close the library, we're gonna close the senior center. And then the override fails and they still stay open. Because
Yeah.
then you lose your credibility.
That's right. So we did lose an override at one point. Boylston had an override when I was on the regional school committee, and you had to not only cut the Boylston portion, but you had to cut the matching Berlin portion of the budget for Tohoto. So it was devastating.
That's the other
Right,
piece,
that was-
we have to match
Yeah.
Boylston.
That was always the hard part, because we knew that if we cut Berlin's
why-
amount to
right.
Tohoto, that Boylston was cutting twice that. And so for every $100 you cut out of the Berlin budget, you're cutting $300 out of the Tohoto budget,
Right.
which is tough to do.
Right.
Mhm.
So
That was
anyway,
the bulk of the most important stuff out. If anyone has questions on the report, I just really
All right.
wanted to take some time to talk about that because
okay.
I just want folks to understand that it's certainly not from a lack of understanding the needs or wanting to be supportive of, obviously what is there for legitimate concern. It's just wanting the process to be open, transparent, and to have a discussion and a dialogue and a negotiation, which we didn't get to the opportunity to have this year.
So I would suggest that if you guys have ideas about how to get the information out, that you bring those ideas with you next time. Whether it's
Mhm.
flyers here and there, or doing a special video presentation or whatever you think,
Mhm.
might work. I guess the more
Yeah.
you do it,
Yeah.
the
I'll email him a couple of ideas, but I think in an open forum, they might not be great. And so I will, because I have sometimes crazy ideas, I'll email them over to you and you can decide if they're crazy or not.
Happy to provide input.
okay. So and then be sure to ask Kristen, if you have any other questions about the rest of her report.
Mhm.
Is that good?
That's good.
All right. Then we're going to move on to discussion on the FY25 budget, which I think we were kind of doing already.
Dovetails nicely.
Yeah.
So there's just a few more budget items to discuss, in terms of, expenditures, and we've had a shift on the revenue side that I wanted to mention as well. So, let me just open up the budget. I'm gonna share my screen. And also it'll show up over here. So you don't have to turn around if I do everything. Oh, TV went to sleep.
Actually, the reason I turn around is I believe actually the people at home and on cable access, what we see up there is what
Yes.
they also see. And so just trying to make sure that what you're showing might actually show up there as well.
Excellent, okay. Let me just make this a little bit larger,
And me sharing the screen.
and then I'm
so
gonna
meeting.
share it, yep.
Yep.
Nope, I'm gonna make that bigger.
I like to pretend I know a little bit about technology. It is what I do for a living. So
It's good.
while I openly say audio-visual stuff is always like, I don't know, been my weak point. There we go. Good.
There and there. We figured that out at FinCom one
Look at
night,
that.
so figure we can use the technology here. All right, so the revenues are always a moving target, right? Because we're trying to make estimates for FY25 based largely on what's going on in FY24. And so as the budget process progresses into March, we now have data from January and February to look at. So I've asked the assessor, again about new growth. And the good news there is based on where we're trending, she is comfortable with $300,000 for a number there. So that does help us a little bit. So that's your first highlight there on what's changed. The other revenue sources is still highlighted because that doesn't take into account capital yet for the schools, because that hasn't been determined at this time. So I'm going to go into more detail, but you'll see at this time, we are still essentially at our fund number of 1,666,000 and change for excess levy based on this budget. And what you have right here is a slight change in the overall number, but you do have a balanced budget at $16,901,866. And I will go through and explain those changes in a bit more detail here. So one of the problems that we came across is interest on investments. So if you all recall, we did do some new investments into Unibank accounts at a 4.5% interest. Unfortunately, those investments are stabilization accounts and CPA, which keep their own interest. So I had to make an adjustment down there from the original estimate and go back and take a more aggressive approach at estimating local receipts. Basically I had to make a $200,000 adjustment, which is pretty significant. So I want to point that out. A couple of ways that I looked at that was to do $50,000 in the new growth, which was helpful. Also, upping ambulance receipts to 125. Ambulance receipts have not been adjusted in many years. They've always been at 100,000. Meanwhile, the ambulance budget has grown substantially and we bring in over $200,000 in receipts every year. Now, some of that does go to offset equipment, but we also have had the public safety mitigation funding, and I spoke with the chief. We have a new ambulance and a new fire truck. He does not anticipate any needs on the new vehicle side for at least 5 years. So we did feel comfortable making a small adjustment there. Again, the free cash for BMS and Tohoto Capital is highlighted because we don't have those numbers finalized yet. There is a change in the needed, given revenue and needed amount for the affordable housing funding because they are entering into a new contract. We were just informed last week, and they told us to expect up to a 20% increase. So because I like round numbers, 20% is 8,400. I just made it 85. I like to also be a little conservative on there to make sure. And then I did take another look at our overlay. So we have around $600,000 already in our overlay. We've been putting in 250 every year. And so, in speaking with the accountant and the assessor, I'm feeling comfortable going down to $200,000 this year in overlay.
And so, because it took me years to figure it out, let's see if I have this correct.
Okay.
The assessor's overlay is basically a fund that if a taxpayer, usually commercial, protests their taxes and we owe them money back, this is the fund that it would come out of.
Very good.
Very good, Scott.
And in a universe where COVID has wiped out everything, I think we went from 200 to 250 because we expected a lot of things happen. At least things are a little bit more known now, but
They are, and we settled the mall,
Yeah.
which was the big unknown. And that
Yeah.
was one of the reasons we were socking away that money every year. And so that's been resolved at this
One
time.
of the years that I was on school committee and begging for more money from the
Yep.
town,
Yep.
they moved some money from overlay to the
Yep.
schools. Probably shouldn't have said that, but.
Well, but there was also one year, I think one of my last years on FinCom, that because officially the overlay number can be set by the Board of Assessors,
Mhm.
not necessarily town meeting, that we had a small number there. There was an issue going on. They significantly raised it at a year where we also raised we raised the spending, but the combination raised tax rates in town significantly higher than anybody was planning on happening. And so we tried to make that a much more transparent number. And since then, trying to make sure that we don't think the assessors are doing 50,000 and the assessors do 250,000. And there was just a bad communication between the various parties that control that number. So
Makes sense. All right, so then on the expenditure side, couple items that we need to vote and actually a couple revotes. The first revote would be, and some of the line items numbers have changed, which is why sometimes the line items are a little tough, but right now we're looking at line items 19 and 20, which would be the assessor full-time salary and the assessor wages. There was a discrepancy in the increases. We had to clarify there's now a 2% cost of living increase only for the assessor, which is 81,600 instead of the 82,000 as previously voted. And then there is just the 2% cost of living increases for the assistants plus one market rate adjustment for the property lister. That actually works out to 66,802 instead of the 67,546 that was originally calculated in the budget. So I would just be asking for a revote on those two line items.
And they both went down by small amounts.
Yes,
And did you ever figure out what the incentive was, whether
did.
she was a full-time or part-time? Because if you look at our policies, Berlin's policies, part-time is, full-time is 40 hours and part-time is fewer than 40, so.
so the state does trump us. And the state says basically anybody over 30 hours. So
So then how does
Is
that
full-time.
impact anybody else who is at that 30? What do we need to do for them? Have we looked at that?
it doesn't because we give benefits to anybody over 19 hours. So we're covered from that perspective.
Any over 20 hours. we
Over
get it.
20.
20 hours or more, yes.
But, you know, I was tootling when this is why I shouldn't be left alone at home on the weekends. Massachusetts, I couldn't find a definition. I went to the Mass law, about unemployment, and Massachusetts does not
tricky.
have a legal definition for full-time or part-time. And I'm concerned
back here.
because we had legal review our policies and they signed off on full-time 40, part-time not 40. So.
I think some things we can set ourselves. I think when it
Yes.
comes to the incentive pays, they might have definitions that are different, but I don't think as a whole, I think companies are allowed to define what they
Thank you.
define as full and part-time.
Right.
But we defined it as 40 full, less than 40 part-time. So
Right.
then
Not
technically
easy
she's
to do
part-time.
here. No, it is a full-time employee. I did confirm with legal counsel for the purposes of the stipend.
In other words, you believe that line 19 should be part-time salary instead of full-time salary.
I do, because our policies and procedures, again, signed off by town council, confirmed, that they confirmed and said that full-time equals 40 and part-time is less than 40.
But does
So
salary also indicate that it might be full-time?
So it
It's a
has,
salaried
salary, too.
position, but we have to put the number of hours in for Worcester Regional Retirement.
So
So
is she less than 40?
for Worcester Regional Retirement, yes, but it's a salaried position, which means she works more than that if she needs to.
We all work more than that, even though we're salary. So I guess I'm just,
The
I'm
difference of 500 between
Well,
the two.
understandable, but to me, it's principle because you had our town council sign off on this policy saying this was full-time, this was part-time. You have Massachusetts who doesn't have a legal definition for either part-time or full-time, but yet we have another legal opinion that says, yep, it's full-time. So you have three. Which one are you picking?
I'm sorry, I'm lost about are we arguing whether or not on line 19 it should be a FT or PT? Is that the?
Line
thing?
21.
21.
Oh, and line 21, the incentive. but
So
one of
the
Right.
difference on the incentive is it's 500 if it's a part-time employee, it's $1,000 if it's a full-time employee. And the Department of Labor, so I can send you the email from town council. This is the same council that reviewed the town's policies. I can ask them about it. I have to say that the policies aren't perfect. There are some things we have found in the policies, so I can ask them about that. But basically for the purposes of state law, which this is a provision of Mass General Law, it's 30 hours or over.
Do you really want her to call town council to ask that?
No, and that's what I was going to say. We've already spent
I
enough
have it in
money.
writing, so I
Oh,
can
okay.
forward it to
We
you.
we've already spent enough money on town council, but I'm just saying it's the principle is that you have a policy book saying one thing, but you have,
But I think we don't
Somebody
know
else
the
saying another thing.
variables, like, who can decide their own, policies? Who can decide?
yeah, I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
I mean.
I can't pull it
not-
up right now because
Not
I'm sharing
for
my screen. I can't get
municipalities,
to my
that's
email.
true.
I'll forward it.
Yeah.
If you,
And, you know, $500 is truly is like a penny in our entire budget. I get that, and I am not arguing that principle. I am just trying to find out when is someone a full-time person and when is someone a part-time person, because depending upon who you talk to and what you look at for documentation, you have two different answers.
I think there are dozens of different
There
answers
are.
based on what you're talking about, because I think for health insurance, it's one thing. I think for
Benefits.
unemployment, it's another one. I think it is for this incentive, it's another, it all depends on retirement, it's a different one.
That's
And
correct.
the definition of part-time and full-time does vary depending on the context.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Me too, thank you.
So. Are we all
Um,
set with that one, or do you
well,
need to
so
vote on that?
I think you're reducing lines 19 and 20 by small amounts, so I will make a motion that we revote on 19 and 20, the assessor's salary and wages part-time to the new recommended numbers.
Which is 81,600 and 66,802.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Sorry,
the
it's-
Yep.
red numbers are the wrong.
The red numbers are
Those are-
what you previously voted,
right.
that I'm reducing,
Okay.
recommending reducing.
Gotcha.
Good, that will help me for future, but further down on the agenda.
Yeah, I thought you might ask what you had voted
Yep, no, that
before,
was
so
good.
that's why
I was trying to
kept
figure
those
that
in there.
number.
Just wanted to know. Yep.
That's good.
So 19 is going down by, again, peg math, 1,000-ish. And,
400 exactly.
all right, 400, and how much is 20 going down? Is that the one where we were going to
About
do the
800.
reserve transfer? If needed?
No,
No.
No.
That the transfer is going to be for town
Treasurer
accountant,
collector.
right,
sorry,
that's
the-
21.
the
which is
treasurer
not changing.
collector's office. This is
Okay.
the assessor, yeah.
All right, I'll second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 And then, I'm actually gonna ask that we hold line 57 because the change here is, fire permitting software. Have been trying to work with our permitting software to add a fire module because, you can apply for a building permit online, but you cannot apply for a fire permit online. So you have to come in anyways, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of online permitting. Yeah,
I
so
thought we asked these questions when we got the software, whether it would cover all the departments, but
it does not. It only covers buildings. So to add the fire module, they initially wanted $20,000. We got them down to 4,000, but then they threw the curveball at us last week that it's 12 grand to set it up as a one-time fee. So I'm back to the drawing table to try to renegotiate with them on the one-time fee and where that would come from. And at this point, I don't want to change the warrant, so you'd have to probably make an ARPA vote on that. So let's hold 57
Let's
for
hold
right
it
now.
till we have that on the agenda.
Yes, there's ever moving parts with all of this. It's just,
Budgets are ever moving.
it's like a living, breathing
Well,
thing.
and it'd be easier to know if we had the money for some of this stuff, if we knew what the school board budget was.
All
So
right.
you're 68 to 70 then is the next one?
Yes, so the reason I'm asking for 68 to 70 to be revoted is, initially you had voted the seasonal laborer as into wages full-time. It belongs in wages part-time. And I am actually now asking for 2 additional seasonal laborers for highway, because if the recreation field renovation passes on the CPA project for $300,000, there is going to be irrigation. Irrigation means grass grows faster and more, and that's more mowing. And so I actually had recreation get a quote for what the cost would be to mow the fields. It's $22,000. So I met with Fred and said, what can we do? And he said, give me another summer laborer for $3,900, which I thought was a much better option. I'm really unwilling to do a project such as field renovation without obviously having the associated labor and maintenance in place to be able to do that. So I would only feel comfortable adding that second seasonal worker. I don't want to put more work on the highway department. And it's $3,900 there. So that's technically a recreation charge, but it would need to come out of the highway budget.
Maybe we need to consider having a grounds type, professional
Yeah,
for all the grounds and the mowing and all that stuff, and not put it on highway.
right. Really what they're doing is the mowing, and we have the building maintenance operator for the inside and those kind of things. But I did have that conversation. I was actually trying to combine and make something work with the schools. That didn't happen for this budget. But I think perhaps in 26, we could look to maybe doing something like that. It's a little bit tricky because some of this field maintenance requires very specialized technical
Yeah.
knowledge on like the irrigation and the field stuff. So you do usually have to contract out for that, but the mowing is something that if we literally had an extra summer person, we were looking
Right.
at Assabet or a college kid who was home, they could be able to help supplement that.
Right.
So. And then the $5,000 on the expense line item is for the bucket truck revolving fund, and that really belongs coming out of free cash as a special article, as you saw in the warrant. So that has just been moved and relocated to the warrant. So that's why I'm asking for a revote on those 3 lines.
I lost my.
So we're
voice on this.
skipping 57.
And we're
And
talking
we're-
about,
Do you want to take a vote on these 3, Scott?
So I'd make the motion that we revote on line 68, 69, 70, which is wages, full-time wages, part-time, and expenses related to highway. And that, well, we didn't talk about the other one yet, did we?
yeah, so the 5,000 should
Well,
be
no, I'm
coming out
talking
of
about
free
line
cash.
75 and 76.
Oh.
I didn't do all yellow on one page.
Oh,
together.
we can include those. That's the transfer station budget, as put forward by the Board of Health. We may put that as a revolving fund. We're still working that out, but I'd like you in principle to approve the budget amounts.
So again, 68, 69, 70, which is highway, full-time, part-time wages and expenses, and 75 and 76, which is transfer station wages and expenses. I make that motion.
You did? Do I hear a second?
Yep, second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, and then a couple on this page. The COA social services budget, the recreation budget, the Assabet Regional Housing Consortium, which as I mentioned, they're recommending we put in a 20% increase because that's going back out to bid. The Tohoto and Berlin Memorial Assessments going up 2.5%. The Tohoto debt repayment, which is a fixed number based on their borrowing schedule, and the animal control officer. So that's everything that's on that last page of the
And
budget.
as much as I normally do a page at a time, I think schools deserve their own conversation. So I think I'm just going to start. So COA, we're talking about a significant increase percentage wise, and
Correct.
not as much dollar wise, but is worthy of conversation of, I think I remember sort of the reason whys for this, but if you would elaborate again.
Absolutely. So the COA director portion has been in the budget. The social services has not. So that has been funded by ARPA for the last 3 years. So this brings the 20 hours of social services into the budget under the wages full-time line item. So that's why there is a $39,000 increase there. Under wages part-time, there is a supplemental funding request to add an outreach worker for half a year at $25,000. And under expenses, there is a supplemental funding request to make the Powder House News a town-wide newspaper that is distributed monthly instead of every other month at a cost of $7,500.
So I have concerns on the part-time wages line. I understand that we need to absorb the social services salary from ARPA. That's not a question. But when Victoria was here a couple weeks ago, I asked her specific questions on the services that the COA provides, hoping that she would give them to me, that it would change my mind about this person, and unfortunately, it did not.
This is the outreach person.
This is the outreach person.
Mhm.
There's no job description, so I have no idea what that person's gonna do. The numbers don't support it. She was saying that if you look at her individual programs, there's like 5, 7 people. She said she supports about 10% of the town, which again, if you do the math, is about 1,000 people of the elder population. And I compare that to food pantry that is all volunteer, and serves 80 families, where Victoria mentioned 100, a little over 100. With that, you know, she mentioned that she has really busy days, and then she has days where she doesn't have anything. That's typical for anybody's job, but she didn't present any numbers on the number of calls. And again, I don't want to know why. You know, calls that she has been requested to by fire and police for her expertise in social services. And unfortunately, at a recent FinCom meeting, you had a member of FinCom that had no idea what the COA director did. So to me, how can I realistically support putting another person on that budget when there seems like there's many opportunities for that job description either to be fulfilled or to get out there a little bit better with the information. And in terms of expense for the papers, again, leave Peg alone on a weekend, watch what happens. Northwestern University did a study that a third of the papers that were around 20 years ago will be gone by 2025. And I thought that's a long time away. And then I realized 2025 is next year. Well, when you say 2025, you're
I'm
thinking,
just thinking, you're left alone and this is.
I know, I'm left alone and this is what I do. So, yeah, I mean, you look at the reasons for decline in newspapers, it's an aging audience. It doesn't appeal to a more higher tech audience. It's a paper waste, increasing
It's gonna be
cost
a
of paper.
townwide newspaper for everyone.
Yes, but I understand that, but you know, let's be honest, when I get
And
the
it
powder,
doesn't have to be on paper. Just because it's, you know, called a newspaper, it could be going to people. you
is
know,
it? But
it
but
could
can
be.
you confirm that it will not be a
They are
paper?
trying desperately right now with the Powder House News to get everybody to just say, here's my email, don't send me a paper anymore. And people
Mm-hmm.
don't, I guess they don't know to do that. I actually told her
Well-
when I was the liaison at the meeting to do that for me.
I mean, because look
But-
at, you mentioned consistently how we have books of town reports
Mm.
that have been printed, which is a waste of money that need to be
I
recycled.
think some of this stuff will be decided if we truly decide to make it a town newspaper. And I suspect because of the cost, it's gonna be something that goes by email.
Well, I expect it to be something that's gonna go actually as paper, because I don't know the last time I went somewhere where someone said, well, I'm not on Facebook, I don't do the internet. And I think the whole reason, and the people who don't know about the Council of Aging is because they're not in some of those spaces. And that I think the intent is to have an outreach worker and to have,
But there are
that
some
place
that
to-
will
to reach.
request.
Oh, yeah, there'll be some.
Paper.
yep. And I think it'll
newspaper.
get, but I think at least to start, this is one of those ways that we don't have a meeting where we don't talk about how we need to get more information out to the people we serve. That we need to not rely on the internet and social media as much to get it out there. And I think this is an attempt. I share some skepticism about how successful it's going to be, but I think it is at least worth an experiment for at least a year to figure out whether or not something like that improves the engagement of town, especially as a town that is, by its own definition, 1/3 of the town population is people who qualify as senior, which are not the people who are necessarily the most technically savvy.
But what about Berlin Cable? Plug to the people in the other room. Everyone who has cable in town has access to Berlin Cable. Information could be pushed out that way. Has that even been looked at? I mean, I'm trying to come up with alternative
Right.
ways before we just start. And again, the amount of money is, never call money not significant, but we're not talking bazillions of dollars. But still, it's the information that was provided to me does not support the part-time wage or the expense. And her numbers unfortunately
Well, that's fair.
did not sway me to change my decision.
I mean, I'm sure that Kristen and Victoria probably spoke and tried to, think outside the box as to how to accomplish some of the goals that need to be accomplished. And this is what they came up with as far as another part-time type person and a different sort of a paper. It's just the cost of the Powder House has just become a exorbitant.
Right.
With the stamps and, the
But
cost
let's
of the
be
postal
honest,
service.
when you get your Powder House News, how long do you spend on it? Less
I
than
actually
5 minutes?
spent more time on it this time when it came by email.
In paper, how much time did you spend on it? And then what did you do with it? Mine went in the recycle bucket after about 5 minutes.
You didn't read it?
There really wasn't a lot in there that caught my fancy.
There are some really good articles lately about people who live in Berlin and their life in Berlin. Okay,
Yeah, it's up to you guys at this point. I've spoken a few times in support of the outreach worker. The paper, I can say we are trying to go more electronic. And one of the things we talked about was doing a postcard where we're going electronic, everybody, unless you return this postcard, you're not getting it by mail. So we talked about possible options, but again, to Scott's point, this was to enhance communication, which we hear about all the time,
yeah.
to try to expand it to a broader list of topics and to try to reach a broader audience.
If we had a newspaper now, we could have put more information out on the schools. Okay, okay. All right. So, I mean, I would like to see a job description perhaps for the part-time person, if we could.
I would imagine, sorry, that our current policies is even if it's in the budget, that before a position gets created and
yes.
advertised, that the job description has to go to the personnel
Yes,
policy. It has to still go through the town administrator and frankly, you know,
process.
there would be a process and at the end of which, you know, we have some more say in it again as the select board.
You would hire, first the job description would be created, it would go to personnel. And yes, it would be advertised, and then I would make a recommendation on a candidate after the interview process, and then the select board would ultimately decide whether or not they agreed with the recommendation.
What's the number one goal for this part-time person?
To be proactive rather than reactive.
So to go out and visit
Try to
people?
reach out to people more and do visits where needed.
Okay,
And you can't piggyback off Neshoba Health. Again, not for mental health issues. That is totally licensed, not going there, not even touching it with a 10-foot pole. But Neshoba neighbors, they do great things with the community. So are we working with them? Again, this is why I'm not so convinced that we need this part-time person, because I just don't think that all opportunities have been looked at and said yes, no, and why. Oops. I think there was a question.
did you want to ask?
I was just gonna ask, was originally that was presented as a full-time position? So what's the number of hours that you expect to need for the outreach worker?
It is a full-time position, but it wouldn't start till January, so it's a half year for this year.
So,
Where I'm at is I am fine for having it in the budget now. I would like to have, before we even advertise it, have another discussion in November, December, maybe with a job description, determine that we still think it adds that value as its final look at before it gets advertised.
that sounds good. Okay,
No,
no for right now for the vote.
So I think I'm gonna do a motion, if I read the room well, that I will move that we approve line 83, the Council on Aging Social Services wages full-time budget. And just line 83.
okay, second.
Okay, we're just doing one now.
I think to.
I mean, one at a
I
time.
think what, I'm not doing
Get a
this at one at a time, but I think Peg has expressed support for that position. I don't want to put a motion that includes things that Peg
Right.
doesn't support. So that someone could, you know, twist her words somehow. So I want Peg to be able to
Okay,
support the full-time position, which she does support.
no, I just meant one thing in the motion.
Yes, one thing in the motion, yeah.
Okay. All right, so we got a motion on the floor. You said second.
I did.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 And then, although it violates my whole page at time, but I'll do the motion of lines 84 and 85 for the wages part-time for the outreach worker and the expenses for an outreach type newsletter.
I'll second it.
Okay. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No?
No,
Okay. So motion passes. You want to move on?
Yep.
I have some comments about recreation. You want me to
Go
do
for it.
that first?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I was reading at the bottom of this document, what is the name of the page that you have?
The
The
supplemental.
supplemental
Yep.
budgets. Recreation has a set of 4 and a set of 2 counselors they're asking for. Based on volunteer burnout. And they intend to hire teenage kids. And I did mention to Kristen today that it would be a conflict of interest if the rec committee members hired their own children. So I wanted that to be sort of out there, so that they knew that up front. Then there was the software. And the annual fee for this is going to increase each year with an increase in revenue. And you told me that they were going to do this through the revolving account a little bit more each year.
That's the
That
goal.
would
So
help
they're paying
to cover it.
30% of that, which is $800 now.
Mhm.
The idea when Julie came before the FinCom was that as you make more, yes, you get charged more, but you're also bringing in use fees because you've renovated those fields. So people may actually rent them out now, whereas now they look at them and they're like, absolutely not.
Hopefully they're making more revenue than just to pay the software off each year.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's where they'd make the revenue is that
Right.
in the camps. And also, so those counselors you mentioned are temporary summer counselors. I also,
All 6 of them?
yep.
I thought 2 of them.
Two of them might have been seasonal for different seasonal events, but I
Okay.
recommended that all of those be funded through the revolving.
Right.
Because especially with the summer, you're gonna be charging camp fees.
Mhm.
And so the camp fees could be used to pay for the counselors, and you're gonna need some seed money up front, obviously, because you're not gonna get that money the first year. They have $1,500 in ARPA to start up this year. Then they can use the money they make this year to pay the counselors next year, and it kind of goes
Right.
that way.
Hopefully,
So,
yep.
and Julie understood that approach.
Mhm.
I believe, I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she understood the rationale I had behind that one.
Yes. Okay. Then there was a rec director. Of course, we'd want a job description for that too, and sort of more of a overview of what that person would do, I guess. At least I
There's a
would.
job description in there, but we'd have to get it approved through personnel. Yeah.
Right. And they're taking field maintenance. They're adding field maintenance to the budget.
They're adding some additional costs for field maintenance, which they need either way, as Julie absolutely pointed out at the last meeting. But there is additional cost for irrigation, electricity and maintenance if the larger project
And
gets
that's
passed.
the CPA, is it?
CPA has an article on town meeting for $300,000 to
Right.
put in a well irrigation and renovate the fields.
Okay. My biggest concern is just that I know it's a small budget, but it did go up about 74%. And where are we going to be next year? Are we going to go up another 74%? I mean, maybe it would be smart to have either the recreation director or the software this first year, rather than both the same year. And one of the things I thought about is that, we don't get to actually talk to the people. We should go to FinCom, I guess, and listen and ask questions there so that we're not saying we really need to talk to these people. But I didn't know whether Peg or Scott also had any questions that if I was to send some questions to Julie to see if she could answer, would they have any other questions that they might like to include?
No, because I was at the FinCon meeting when Julie presented her 85 pages of documentation for rec and what was needed and money going out the town because the town does not have programs. And there was actually a gentleman on FinCom who said, yeah, would love to have my kid play in town, but you don't have any programs. So keep the money in town and
Yeah, my grandkids go to Northborough,
So
but it's bigger and they can afford to do that.
correct. So I'm thinking that as these programs start to develop, that, yeah, it's gonna be a little chase for a while, but you know, they've got some great ideas. I'm hoping that they can bring some programs into town and keep the money in Berlin where it belongs for our kids. Our kids. Mine's way too old. Your kids. Your kids. Mm-hmm.
Grandkids.
Grandkids.
Okay. I
Yes.
just don't want another runaway budget, I guess.
Yeah,
Um,
I've shared that I think our role should be just departments we oversee and that independent bodies can make the recommendation to FinCom and FinCom's job is to make the recommended to the town one. And I don't feel a need to overstay what FinCom
for
is
this
doing.
one in particular? or-
Well, I've said it several times during the budget process that, you know, I think Board of Health should be able to set their budget and other bodies should be able to set theirs.
Well, I mean, we're here for a reason.
I will say on this, the FinCom has held off and they do hold off to vote until the select board has recommended. And I understand the elected official point and not, I mean, recreation is appointed by the select board. So I would argue you have a little bit more right when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
And just so you know, I did remove the counselors. If you look at the line 93, part-time wages. I did take out the 2280 for the counselors because I do believe that that should be part of the revolving fund.
Well, it's hard to say that things should go into the revolving fund right now because there really isn't that much in the revolving fund.
Right, but that's why if they use the ARPA seed money for this year to start the camps, collect the fees, then they use the fees to pay for the counselors next summer.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the snowballing effect.
And I wish them a lot of luck on the fields because I think the revolving account is it's gonna weigh heavily on getting the fields up to par. Which I actually thought they looked pretty good compared to the year before and the year before that, but
You gotta run on them and realize that they do this.
I don't know if that's gonna change. Get
Oh.
thicker grass in different areas
Mm.
or something. I don't know. But I mean, I really do hope that the fields is where their money is going to come from as far as the revolving account. And I haven't seen for how many years now have we not seen anybody renting out the fields?
Towns won't rent them.
Right.
They won't rent them because they're in,
But they're looking better now than they were a couple of years ago, and that's why I think that they probably had more people renting them when they were really bad
I don't know.
than
I
now.
can't tell you how much that they rented, but yeah. I mean, they look good, but when you're on them, they're not good.
Well, I mean, I've been over there to see a couple of my kids' soccer games, so
But when they do their egg contest, run out on the field with them. They'll be
because they're
fine.
going to the dirt spots.
They're going to the dirt spots. That's where you hide the eggs in the dirt.
I don't know what your pleasure is. I am fine with 92 and 93 as written.
Well, I would have liked to have some extra time to
What,
contact her and ask her some questions.
that's fine. I'm also fine just giving it. We have,
You want to push that to next Monday?
next
Okay.
Monday sort of has to be our end though, right?
Mhm.
I was gonna, I know it's a little jumping around, but the 100 for the Assabet Regional Housing Consortium, which we just talked about earlier, and the 109, the intermunicipal animal control officer, and the 110, the expenses for that officer. Well, except it's all going to an expense line. I was gonna try to do together and then we can go back and do the various school ones, whatever our pleasure is for those. The animal control officer is a significant increase,
Mhm.
and I think we've talked about that a little bit in that's what it sort of takes.
It really does. It's an intermunicipal, it would be part of an sorry,
Municipal.
thank you, agreement, which is why it has been moved down to the 800s and the intergovernmental expenditures. And we can try to go it alone. I don't know that we could find anything that would be all that much cheaper than this. And I think that well, I shouldn't say everyone, but we've received some very good results with the current animal control officer.
And that, one of the reasons why it's getting both more expensive and others is that there's not a lot of people who are licensed to do that. And that we should have someone who is licensed to do it for a variety of reasons.
Right, and this is
The
licensed.
urban communities are paying 33,000 each.
Right,
Yeah.
so the current communities,
So by adding more, we're helping drop the price.
Right.
So if we think we're gonna do it solo, we're looking at 33 plus.
right, and so because I don't know if the microphone's picked up the chief in the back, but he said that the other towns are currently paying 33,000 in this, and by us joining it, it lowers both for them and makes it sort of tiny bit more affordable for us.
And they're trying to bring
Right.
in one additional community, and if they do, that would drop down to just under 18. So that would roll back to free cash.
I have to say, there's been no headaches
Right,
Mm-mm.
with
right,
this.
yep.
Do we have, can we just add it to the list? Do we have a job description for the animal control officer?
I'm almost certain
Yeah,
we do. We
I
wouldn't
think
have
it's
been
in the
able to
contract,
appoint.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a contract with that person, I believe.
No, it's a stipended position and
Okay.
appointed by the select board, but yes, but we wouldn't have been able to appoint.
Not the ACO, the other job that she's going to take on.
Yes.
Thank you. Animal inspector, do we have a job description for that?
We must in order to appoint, I'll
I
check.
think we probably do, but maybe it needs to be updated. That's my
Yeah.
guess. Because it's been
A
a long
while.
time since.
We've
Let
had
me,
it.
let me check.
So,
Okay.
are we fine with sort of 100, 109, and 110?
Mm-hmm,
If I'd make that motion?
mm-hmm.
Okay,
Second.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if I even have a strong, well, I have several strong opinions, but some of them are contradictory. For the Berlin Memorial School Assessment and Berlin Memorial Capital Assessment.
May I make one
Uh,
suggestion?
yeah.
108 is a fixed amount that's set on a debt schedule.
Oh,
You
I'm
could
sorry, I
pass that
missed
one
that.
first if you'd like.
Yeah, 108 is the Tohoto debt repayment, which is like a mortgage payment. It is a set number that really, even if we wanted in the school board, wanted, it's not a number that changes because of agreement. So I would motion 108 then.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 On the
I
cap,
mean, you
on
can
the,
always re-vote.
Right.
You know, if we do,
Well, but we only have one more week before we are done. And so there's
Correct.
not a lot of opportunities to revote.
okay.
on the capital assessment where they asked for 3 times what we have, are there any contractual obligations that we have to give them $200,000 to fix? So capital could turn around and say, you get nothing.
They could, the problem with that is some of those have long-term impacts, right? Like with
that's
the
what I'm
other
asking.
facilities. So like
Okay.
we talk about with facilities preventative maintenance, where if you fix a hole, it's better than having to fix the whole thing. You know, it's that. So that's my concern.
So when is capital meeting?
I think, was
I
it-
don't,
Well,
we
but
don't
the-
have a
Right.
date.
We don't have a date because the school says they weren't going to come to present. And so
Correct.
they have a handout that doesn't have a lot of details on it. But said they weren't going to come to present.
So we're still discussing what to, or
And
Anna
it is-
asked me about what to do and I,
Well.
Yeah.
It is also true that even if they had a detailed list that listed out, let's say $1 million worth of projects, and we totally agree that there was $1 million worth of projects to be done, we give them a dollar amount. They still decide how to spend
Correct.
that dollar amount. And so they're giving us a guidance of how they think they're going to spend it. And they've been generally good when they
Mhm.
change that, but there's nothing that legally requires it. And so
Right.
there could be a number, you have 2 numbers in your recommendation. And can you explain sort of how you came to the numbers that you have in your recommendations?
absolutely. So if I'm actually gonna, to do that, I'm gonna jump down to the free cash page.
Yep.
If you look at our free cash plan, sorry, I gotta make that a little bit smaller. So right now, we've expended, because the departments were, frugal. And also we're trying to save up for what we know inevitably in FY 26 will be all of the facilities improvements that we need to make as a result of that study. We've actually only expended 17,900 plus 50,000 from the capital plan. So just as a starting point, I took the rest of that amount, which would be the 533 minus the 67,900, which leaves you with 465,423. Their ask for Tohoto, which is the one we need to match Boylston on, was $233,675. That is far more doable than the million plus for BMS. And it keeps us, if we're able to match from the district meeting and all that stuff. So my recommendation was to pay the Tohoto ask and give the rest of the money that was left over to BMS, and then they can decide what they would like to do with that. That's how I
Okay.
arrived at, I backed into the number.
Right, which is fine, and we have a planned December town meeting that potentially we could decide to do something else with, and get them more money for more capital stuff. If they came forward with a plan that capital planning, agreed to, so.
So I'm trying to remember what was on the capital list for Berlin Memorial,
I
and
think,
one was the roof.
No, I've
Right,
got
that was
it.
the big
Hold
one.
on.
So right now you're looking at 233 and change for Tohoto and 1.3 for BMS. Correct?
So they actually reduced their, and I apologize that I just got the information last week. They did reduce the request. They took off the roof.
And then what was left?
Because they're gonna go for
well,
grant.
586,000.
Correct. So it leaves
565.
865,132. So my apologies. It was one, this is where the not getting the information, direct, but going off of unvoted on information becomes tricky, right? So their initial ask or their initial preliminary number was a 1.6 almost number. Now they've taken off the $800,000 for the roof, leaving us with 865,132. They're talking about an MSBA grant or phasing like they have here, the 322 for doing the shingle part of the roof. Oh, they got a quote too that came in lower than the 800,000 that they were anticipating. So
Well, my point
it
is
just
that
keeps changing.
the number that you throw in there should be close to one or the other of the items.
Right. Well, and this is the issue with
Because
the
otherwise
quotes.
it's gonna go who knows where.
Right,
Am I
so,
right?
and I apologize, there's an even further iteration. So this one does have the shingle roof back, in at a quote of 322,000. So
Well,
they
we
had
don't have
originally
the
asked
roof-
for 8.
Amount. We don't
Yes.
have that amount.
Now we do.
They do.
So if you look at,
No, I'm saying we don't have the money to pay that. Isn't that?
We don't
it's-
have 322,000, is what you're
Yes.
saying.
we have 331 left over if you follow whatever idea I came up with, which is whatever.
And you put in, and you put in 231,
Oh, I put in 2, I'm sorry.
231.
Yeah.
230.
So
Correct.
what item on their list would be approximately 231?
I would leave
Is
that
there
up
one?
to them to, and what I've
Then it
asked
won't
for
end
is a
up there at
ranking.
all.
Then people should vote
We-
for better school board members. We, at some point, we give them a dollar amount they can spend over, because we could again say, we're giving them $322,000 because we want them to replace the roof. We think that's the number one thing, and they could decide to not do that at all. We have
Correct.
no control over that, and so
Well,
we're
that's
just
why I
giving them a
was
dollar
saying
amount.
if you make it the amount closest to one of the items,
Yeah, but.
it might be more likely to get done.
Yeah, but you can still break it up and you can, as Scott said,
Oh,
here's your
well.
$20,
All right, I tried.
you spend.
Yeah.
So those are the items that are on there as
Yep.
of right now. And I apologize, it's gone through several iterations. And again, just to stress, this has not been voted on by the school committee. And as you can see under the HVAC air conditioning, that is just a round number, not a quote, which are some of the things that the capital committee had concerns about.
Um,
Do you want it? Well, Julie had a question in the back.
Oh, I'm sorry, Julie.
Oh, I didn't have a question. I was just gonna say that because there's no information, capital can't do anything. They
Right.
can't vote to release the funds until the school actually gives them the information that they need.
So you won't vote until what, the 20th? Yeah.
Well, if they're not doing a presentation, they won't vote at all.
To have them come this week, and they said they're not coming till after the vote.
Right.
After their 19th meeting, that they won't know.
So that's what Anna was asking me. So I guess we'd have to do it on the 21st, because usually the only time the capital committee can get everyone together is a
Well, that's what I'm
Thursday.
saying is from that email that Anna, I was really sick when I was doing that exchange, so I don't remember the whole thing, but she she needs specific information from the schools.
Yeah.
Before capital can.
Doesn't sound
meet
like you're
to
gonna get
even
it.
Decide to release those funds.
Right, so what
And-
Julie, oh, go ahead.
But yeah, so she can't really schedule a meeting until she knows she's gonna have that information. And it's not clear that even after they do the vote next week, that they'll have specific information for what capital needs to release the funds.
Right, so just because the mic isn't picking you up, I'm just gonna reiterate. No, that's fine. So what was asked for by Anna Crane, who's the chair of the capital committee, was descriptions of each of the items, because like instructional technology, what does that consist of? How does that break down into the various sub items? Card swipes on access doors, which doors, more information, the HVAC air conditioning, what is that? Is it just air conditioning? Initially it was HVAC, which does contain air conditioning, but are those mini splits? Are they whatever? You're looking at other things on here that don't really have clear description, non-student device replacement. I don't know what that is. So what Anna had asked for was more specific descriptions of these items, and what we did receive was an updated list with numbers, but still no explanation of those items. So Anna had invited them to come on the 14th, to which they declined.
And
Right.
so then what Julie was saying is that because they don't have any descriptions, they can't plan a meeting, so technically we could have no money
Well,
for capital.
and so I think well,
They need four-
it's
they
not that we
also
don't
need
have the-
what, 48
Yeah.
hours
Yeah.
notice to post a meeting?
right, and so a way out
So
of the
that's
catch
not gonna
22
Not gonna happen.
Right, so
It's not gonna
as,
happen.
as a way out of the catch 22, in that I am fine with the numbers that are sitting here right now in blue. And because I think our only option, if we don't do that, is to vote 0. And I believe the schools have some legitimate capital needs. And so I would like to make sure they have some money for some capital needs. And if it's not enough, sorry, we don't have the information to give. I think our options are sort of 0, which I think is too draconian, or the numbers as they're currently recommended, because that's what the town has to afford. It is all the rest of our free cash that is generally allocated to capital projects. And so,
So then there is no more free cash?
No,
No.
there's no more capital, free cash
Okay,
for
right, right,
capital,
right.
but they've already taken, a capital committee's taken their votes on the other projects
Right.
that submitted on time. The idea, though, as I mentioned before, was that they were saving some of that money to roll over to the next year and potentially put towards the
Yep.
facilities study
I-
needs, so.
I'm
But again, there
suggesting
are
that
valid
get there,
needs
yeah.
at the schools, and I completely understand what you're saying, Scott, which is why I just backed into that number
Yeah.
as a suggestion.
So which numbers are we looking at? The
The
231 and
blue.
the 233?
yes.
You get
yep,
to look
yep,
at the blue.
yep. Yes, we get to look at the blue, which is the 231 and the 233.
The capital
Lines
assessment.
105 and lines 107.
Okay, so did you make a motion?
I would make a motion that we recommend to the town 231,787 for Berlin Memorial School capital, and 233,675, if my eyes are working, for Tohoto capital assessment as the recommended select board budget for the town meeting.
I'll second it and I have a question. So in the event that capital does not receive any information, detailed information on the sheet that you just had up, therefore, are we obligated to give them the 231 and the 233, or because we don't know how it's being spent, we can say no?
Well, that's what I was asking.
So again, the schools can spend the money on whatever they want
Yeah.
to spend it on,
But
but I would probably, I don't want to guarantee what I would do in town meeting floor, but this is the
We have
recommended
another week
budget.
to decide too,
And,
though.
and we could on town meeting floor, enter into motions to change those numbers based on like, we have no backup to this. We don't think it's going to be well spent. We're going to suggest it goes to 0.
Okay.
The problem with doing 0
Correct.
now is
I know.
that it's harder to raise it on the floor of town. I would suggest that when we, hopefully if the school board votes on something, that at least their recommended number that we're allowed to on the floor of town hall, the floor of town meeting to raise to is whatever they're requesting, so that if the schools wanted to ask for an increase in it, they could on the floor still.
I know that FinCom gave them the number last week. Is it possible for another FinCom or you letter to go out to them to say,
Oh, FinCom only gave them the operating number. They have not given them the
right,
capital
so I'm
number.
saying, is it possible, I don't know if it would come from Anna because she's capital gal or you to say, here's your number?
I don't think it can come from Anna because capital planning committee hasn't
They
voted.
haven't voted.
And because they're not getting presentation, I would be floored if capital planning ever put a vote together.
Okay.
You know, if I'm Anna, in some respects, I'm doing a vote saying that their recommendation is the zero number because they don't have anything to do it, then I would have no problem with that in any manner, shape or form. I still
Okay.
stand by the motion I
Or
put
even,
together,
You
but
know, before the warrant goes to print, there's still a chance to change it from what we're voting now. Correct?
I mean, yes, but the warrant's going to print in 3 weeks.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and
So.
I wanted to go to print in 2 weeks because I'm tired of people getting it only 2 or 3 weeks before town meeting. And
Right,
So,
and the warrant's
fine.
essentially done as well, the warrant that I've given you in your packet that we're gonna talk about next. Here's what I would say, if capital didn't vote, because they do obviously recommend the capital plan, I would say no vote on the school items, but these items come out of the budget, so it's a little bit different than the normal capital plan, but they still do take a vote on them. FinCom, because they're in the budget, will take a vote as well after the select board takes a vote. But
Mhm.
Anna and I need to obviously have a conversation and figure out where to go next.
I think it's pretty obvious. Yes, that's what I was trying to say before.
But
All
as
right,
Rod said,
so-
we can't be that cruel.
What, did we take a vote?
no, I put together a motion that was second. But I don't
And that
what
was
it-
the blue.
Yes,
Okay. And,
31
okay,
and
then we'll,
33.
yeah, and you seconded it. So it's all in favor is, say aye.
aye.
Aye. I mean, the same reasoning is for the assessments.
I would argue that there are capital needs at the school that you don't want to
Mhm.
fall into further repair. So that makes sense I mean, it does make sense to do something you don't want to do nothing. I mean, because then if
No,
something
no.
major needs to be replaced, so yeah.
No, I'm just saying that the operating budgets, the assessments, that.
Right.
You know, why not take a vote on them also right now?
Oh, I might.
Yes.
I was just taking these in pieces because again, they're related to each other and
Okay.
so I am just I want clarification in that the fiscal year 24 annual town meeting number that you started with
Mhm.
is the free extra money we gave them from free cash, correct?
It is, so that is the
Yep.
disputed number, right? Because they're starting at 4.3.
Right, and they can start with whatever number they want. I am starting with the number that we gave them as an assessment last year, not counting the
Free cash.
bonus money that we gave them because they had a very special need one time that was going to help for special needs children that was required, that we were going to get reimbursed for so that we wouldn't have to do it again following years.
That's correct.
And so, and I would like to, and I did spend some time when we were looking at the regional agreement. I do not see anywhere in the regional agreement where we're required to present their budget. Our budget is I believe their budget should be in the requested column, which allows them on the floor to make arguments they want. But I think there's still one recommended budget from the select board and FinCom that goes to town meeting.
Okay.
And you know, people out there who are watching this and people who might be on the school board and you, I'd love to be wrong on that, but
Have an open invitation for them to come next week to help dispute.
and so
If it's on the agenda.
And it may be just a difference in how we have to
Yep,
present it.
yep.
Obviously it'd be easier to present it all in one. It's less confusing to
It is.
people who are looking at it going, what do you mean you have two?
Right.
You know,
That's it.
That's it. They put a request in.
I
That's
know,
Right.
right. Just like every other department did, and our departments generally did on time and have had meetings and have gone back and forth several times.
Well, and
Um,
that's just it. And if they go over, then we ask them for explanations 5 times more, and they've gladly given it to us, so.
All right. So.
I
we need to
just
move
worry
on.
that it's so hard to live within 2.5%.
That's what
but
we had
I,
asked for at the,
I know, and
onset of
I'd
all
be,
this.
I'd be more, because I also have a mind that says the town bylaw says if you don't get your budget in time, we can zero. We do not have to give 2.5%. We can just say you're flat funded.
And that's why we're giving
Um,
2.5, because it's
and-
a little nicer.
And so 2.5 is a little nice. So I would vote lines 104 and 106, the two assessments to be the 2.5% increase over last year's assessment. I can stop there.
So then the numbers that we're looking at are 4.7 and change and 3.7 and change, correct?
Yes, for a total of about $170,000 more than they got last year.
No, those are their requests.
Oh,
4.02.
4.7 and 3.7 are
Oh,
their
sorry,
requests.
their requests are 4.7, 3.7, right.
Oh, so
I'm
we're
requesting
giving,
$4,022,545 for Berlin Memorial, which is a $98,000 increase.
Yep.
And that $3,286,541 for Tohoto, which is an $80,000 increase. For a total again of about $178,000 increase between the two schools.
I'll second that.
okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 We did do Assabet already. Yes, we
Mhm.
did.
Yes, we've done
All
that
right.
because Assabet,
Is by pupil.
well, it's also by pupil, but they got a presentation and got a budget in.
Yeah, ours is
a
by
month ago
pupil at
plus.
Tohoto too.
So
It's always been
it's
the
not
tension
cut
because
and dry.
Assabet, because they have several towns they have to present in front of, has their budget generally ready by the end of
It's
January.
regional.
So actually now you voted everything but recreation and health insurance, which if you vote that Monday, then we're done.
Do you not want to do health insurance tonight?
I don't because it depends a little bit on what you do. I'm debating whether we go with 3 spots for new employees or 2 right now.
Okay.
So
All right, well, we probably need to keep moving here because it's already after 9 and we have some new business plus an executive session. All right.
We're doing the warrant.
Yes, and I had questions on the warrant. I
Um,
just have to figure out what tab that's on.
Okay, do you have questions about the warrant then?
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
have things that I would like to discuss removing from the warrant.
and I would like to know that as well, because my goal is to send that to town council tomorrow for review and editing and all that good stuff.
Um, do we have an approximate balance of stabilization, general everyday stabilization, not capital stabilization or all the other funds that I'm not a big fan of?
10.7. Sorry. I was just looking at it the other day. But thank you. I got too many numbers floating around in my head. Thank you. 1.7. I did better than I thought.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's about 1.7 million. The reason I ask, and I'll ask this again, when it comes to the money we're putting in OPEB, is whether or not we might want to lower the amount of money that we're putting into those two funds, so that we potentially have, some more free cash available to us, by the time we do a fall town meeting, or if on the floor of town meeting, we have to increase, the amount of money we're potentially putting in the capital for the schools. And so I want to give us a little bit more flexibility, to do that. I don't have a number off the top of my head. I also just am sometimes frustrated that when that cash flow, the policy on cash flow, what to do with free cash, was recommended guidelines, and they're slowly becoming the rule, which they were never meant to be the rule. They were generally meant to be that's best practice. And I just.
They are, I should clarify, they are recommended, like you
Yeah.
said, best practice, and you don't have to do it that way, which is why like capital doesn't have to go up to the 533. And last year the capital did not put money in capital stabilization as recommended because so much money was given on the capital side to the schools.
Right. Sorry, I'm trying to find the motions.
That article is, I tried to reorganize it and put like with like. I hope it looks a little bit more, it flows a little bit. Article 14 is the transfer funds to general stabilization. So It is just the recommended 10%, which is 177,787.
And if we had capital needs at a fall town meeting, nothing says we couldn't take out of general stabilization as well. Just taking out of general stabilization requires a 2/3 vote.
Right.
I mean, I would like to see that number potentially down to just, I don't know, even 100,000. But I don't feel so strongly about it. If the two of you really think it should stay at 177,
I actually think it should stay there. I mean, I was being hounded at that meeting that I went to on the 6th for, what is your levy? What is your levy? And I said, all you
Oh.
gotta do is look at what Boylston's giving at Tohoto, and you do our formula for,
right,
that's what we pay at
we,
Berlin.
right, because
Or
the general rule,
Tohoto.
budgets aren't, how much money can we maximally take out of taxpayers? Let's take that. We talk about what is needed. And then we see whether or not of the things that are needed, what can we afford? Because there are times all of our departments have had things they've needed
Mhm.
that we have had to do without because of other things. And then so on Article 13, then the transfer of funds to OPEB stabilization. I thought when we were given the presentation that this is not well funded across the state, and that at even 50,000, we'd be almost in the top half of the state of funding into that account.
So it's not, it's generally you're funding about, most towns are funding less than 10% of their liability. So our liability is just about $3 million. So that would be somewhere, in the ballpark of $300,000 or less. So again, I was just proposing
Yeah.
that recommended policy of putting 10% in, but
Which I think you should.
Certainly
I think
open
your
to
recommendation
change.
should be along the lines of the policy. I'm not fouting that. I'm just deciding whether or not in our first year of OPEB that we should be putting in that much money when, again, a lot of them around the state are not
Mhm.
well funded at all. And I think we should put something into it. I was thinking, in a $50,000 to $75,000 range, again, freeing up 100,000 free cash potentially for added capital for the schools if they needed it, or frankly, just not spending it just because the money sits in the account, as you point out, doesn't mean we should go and spend the funds.
I would feel more comfortable personally leaving the general stabilization account number at 177 and reducing the OPEB number. If
I
you're
think
gonna
that-
reduce one of them.
Right, and again, I think I am fine leaving general stabilization where it's at. And so, could we change this to, I don't know, is there a number people like?
Want to just split it and go half?
Yeah, so let's pick a round number that's about half. So let's say, 80,000?
And this is to,
Article
85?
13.
no, I mean, this is in
Article-
order to have money free for the schools.
This
again.
is money to do whatever we
We need
want,
to.
again, not to spend all of our free cash down to necessarily zero on something that I don't think we need to fully fund OPEB or
first
fund a
year.
lot the first year. And so I think if you do half, it's really like 85,000.
Mhm.
So let's do 80, I propose we lower Article 13 to 85,000.
Yeah, I'll second that. Just because we have the money doesn't mean that we need to spend
Right.
it. Something could happen, God forbid, COVID round 2 comes. You're gonna need money from somewhere, so.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I didn't really have, but no, I'm fine.
I spoke to Kristen this afternoon, gave her a typo change or whatever it was.
Yep.
And also I was talking to her about adding the new fourth modification language. Is that the way we have done it in the past? Do you remember? Either one of you? June? Anybody?
The full,
You don't
The
know?
full agreement.
The
I thought
all
we
the
would just
language.
summarize the points of the agreement, but
I would potentially make sure the full agreement is available like on our website and other places like that, and maybe even say in the article, the warrant that's being mailed out.
I thought
that-
that we had the language in the warrant. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
bother me if we
I don't
just
remember
decide
one way or
that-
the other.
Okay,
I will find out if legally, because the development agreement itself was approved by town meeting, if
Yes.
the full language of the modification needs to be in the warrant. I think it's a valid point.
Yeah, I would think that if you are approving that modification, you know, you have the right as a citizen to read it.
They said, because I think Eloise uses that for the proceedings when she
Right.
does.
Okay, and it'll make the warrant
Uh,
4 pages longer,
right.
or two, whatever, but you know, it is what it is.
I do like 4 and 5, the way they split out. I generally like the wording of them.
Do we have any update on 5? There's a few items that required additional information. Do we have any updates?
5. Yeah,
Article 5?
Yeah, which is the 4th modification.
Still working on you're talking about with regard to the road?
That one and the 5% annual late payment?
Yeah, we're still working on that.
Waiting to get the language from John Foster.
Yeah, I kind of finished the budget and the warrant first, and now I'm going back to that.
Did you get any language from him?
I got a couple emails I need to check.
Okay,
And will there be a financial breakdown of, you know, we're getting this, we're forgiving that, we're getting this, we're forgiving that?
So I did up a draft,
Mhm.
and sent it over to be taken a look at. I just want to make sure everything looks right,
and that was
because
what
it's
he
going
was
in the
talking
warrant.
about, though.
Yep.
When he called me today, but he thought that maybe we didn't need to go so in depth. You
I
get
thought your
this, you
description
get
got,
that. I mean,
That's why I tried to do
at
it.
least for me, the description got to a lot of that because it talked about sort of, this is the thing of
Mhm.
like the bullet point, you know, will nullify the position requiring the annual payment of 51,200 for not constructing a community care facility, you know, due to the unanticipated hotel revenue that generates about 220,000 a year, that the hotel wasn't part of the original agreement. So that's bringing us a lot more money than we originally anticipated from that. And as a whole, the town doesn't really want a continuing care retirement community at this point either. And so, and that one, and then several of the other places it talks about what we have given up and then what we get in return.
have we never actually took a vote on this.
Because we had outstanding questions, so we sat on it last week. We didn't
Okay.
pass it. We were waiting for information to come back before we
And we
voted
still
on it.
are.
And select
Okay.
board does not have to have an opinion on things.
Correct.
No, this
But
was
yes.
just in order to say that, yes, we agree
I-
that this is the way we should
I am hoping we can end
work
up
this
with
out.
Yeah,
a
we,
3-0 agreement on this, because I think that helps get it passed and gets many of these loose ends taken care of, but
it sounded from what, I think the way we left it, there was general consensus, but we needed a little more clarity on the interest,
The 5%.
the
Yep.
5%
Yeah.
and the road.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I can try to button that up a little bit more this week, and if we
I
need to
know,
bring it
that's
back
what
on the
I'm thinking.
18th, I can.
Yep.
this is a public document.
It is.
Because we saw these details from executive session, but at this point, it's public
That was the
document,
problem I
Yep.
ran into as well.
Yep.
So yeah.
which is fine, because the other party to this, I mean, the reason we do executive session is that some negotiations could, this stuff is stuff that's been conveyed to them.
We've
that they-
agreed
Yes, it
upon it.
is.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
has been conveyed to them. Okay,
I like the warrant.
yeah,
It flows a little bit.
I think
Better.
that was the only thing I had on the warrant in my
Right.
notes here.
The materials for we are still missing from the capital, the one materials for upstairs renovation at the municipal offices.
Yeah,
That's a missing
he's
number.
still working on that one. I
And you have
talked
a
to Chief.
plug
yesterday.
number from capital on that, because we didn't just give all that free cash to the schools and not have any money left for the renovation of this building.
No,
Right?
because that's public safety mitigation.
The public safety mitigation, okay, good. Hindsight, like, oh my goodness, did we just not make
It's
one of our core
Good
projects be able to happen?
questions. No, let's,
All right, so we're all set with the warrant for now?
Okay.
One
I
more look next week or something?
make
And
that
then we'll
change on
divide.
Article 13 and I'll send it
we'll
off
what?
to legal.
Divide who does what, or do you want to wait till it gets closer?
Oh, it doesn't
I
matter.
think who does what, we do like the week or
The
two
week
before.
before.
Yeah,
All right. good.
All right, so we'll move on to new business anyway. And we'll talk about the Clover Road Brewing one-day license on April 11th at 19 Carter and May 25th at the Dump Run Car Show.
Just fire chief to get back to me about checking the, because they're going to be pouring inside, he just has to check the,
Oh, that's right. I did see
Sure.
that.
egress? No,
No, he wants,
Number of the occupancy.
Occupancy,
Yeah,
okay, so
occupancy.
Oh.
just if you're going to vote this, it would, you have all the other sign offs, just contingent upon the fire chief signing off on occupancy.
and is this a okay thing to be walking around the center of town with a beer?
You can't walk with it.
Well,
They'll put- they'll be able to
Well,
walk out
it's
there.
9:20, he says yes.
Yeah, it's
This
not,
is
it's
the
not
dot-
like you're
it's
walking all
within
over
an
town.
enclosed
It's within an
area.
Beer gardens are usually in one section.
it has to be
Correct.
roped off.
Right.
So you
Well,
can't,
that's what I thought.
right.
Yeah.
You can't
Those
stroll
little
down to the
bears,
general store with a keg on your back. So you could try.
long as it's not open.
Church and then.
Right.
Yeah, no, the ABCC requires it to be in a roped off area.
Okay, well, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like
it's no
children
different than
don't.
St. Joseph's that they rope off an area when we do that.
I think this is a local business helping two local events. I can't see of anything that it'd be better to support. So assuming that we get the final sign off from the fire chief, I would pass the motion that we support the 1-day license on April 11th and May 25th for Clover Road, Brewing.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye. And then we've got the,
Cadoba to Cadoba. They
Yes.
are different
I mean,
corporations. They're
trying to think of how do you
The
say
word,
that
the
again?
word.
or
is just-
Qdoba, I don't know, I say
Qdoba.
Cadoba.
Qdoba?
Qdoba.
I'm probably wrong. It is a change of corporation, from one and a transfer of ownership from one entity to another, so it does require a vote of the select board.
Okay,
And this, again, we have department heads have all signed off, fine, because again, it's, I would,
Roman Vic Schillers.
yes, and Sunday entertainment licenses,
Yes,
because
so
they have music playing. and that's-
we do ask though, because this would be, if anyone had concerns
Right.
at this time, this is the
Yep, yeah.
opportunity
point.
to address
Yeah.
anything.
yeah.
But everybody was fine with
No,
Cadoba to Cadoba.
I would make the motion from
Qdoba
one
to
entity
Qdoba.
to the other entity. Yes, I'm not gonna read the names because I'll put the word eats on the wrong one and it'll mess everything up. So as written.
second.
It's after
Okay.
9. I'm not responsible for what I say after 9. I've
I
made that
know,
very
see,
clear.
we get a little giddy.
Don't look at me, I'm fine at 9:20.
I get punchy.
Me too. All right, so got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And discuss the town administrator evaluation process.
The best time of year.
Mhm.
So why don't you check my dates as I read them off here? I have April 1st, your self-evaluation will be due. That's Kristen's self-evaluation. On April 15th, the select board evaluations will be due.
Mhm.
And then I put on either April 22nd, hopefully, or it could be the 29th, my cumulative review. Plus I would meet with Kristen to share
Mhm.
the evaluations from everyone. And then, so the 22nd or the 29th would be the day that we would vote on our
Mhm.
cumulative review. The department heads are invited to just give feedback if they would like to. You could email it to me. And I could share it with those that I'm supposed to share it with. And does
I
that
think
sound like
should-
we get the same dates?
Yeah, and you'll send an email out to that department head distribution
Yes.
list as we get closer to the time to let them know that they can submit feedback to you.
Yes.
Although I appreciate that part of it, I wouldn't do much more, but I think we should invite feedback from anyone in town who thinks they have feedback. Committee chairs, committee members, volunteers. I
Well,
wouldn't
as
send an
I-
email out to like 2,000 people, but I wouldn't mind potentially even on the town website putting, that April is the month we're evaluating our town administrator, if they have feedback, and a link to your email address, and you can, I think, use your judgment on including the ones that are appropriate.
So the only issue with that is just the process as it's prescribed in the TA bylaw is a little bit different. I mean, I'm certainly open to feedback. I don't know that it would factor in on the rating side of
Right.
things according to the bylaw.
And what I have said before, when we had this question at school committee,
Mhm.
was that you are invited to send
Oh, yeah.
feedback to any one of the select board members anytime of
Any-
year.
Right.
It doesn't have to be now.
Right, although if we're currently evaluating it, I think it'd be, again, I don't expect a ton and are at all, it could be that the request is for both people watching and others, if they have feedback, get it to the one of the three of us, and we can include what pieces we want in our evaluations of this, of the
I mean,
district.
the numbers themselves are only us.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I mean, if anybody wants to write a letter, write an email, we welcome hearing from you on any subject.
I mean, it was part of my pushing to move this into April, which I get is a busy time of year. And that's unfortunate, but I found that on my first year on the select board that I was charged in my second meeting to write the evaluation of the town
Right.
administrator, and that just
Yeah.
didn't seem to
That's
make
right.
sense. And so I thought it would be great sort of for the board as it existed for the year to write it, so that any new incoming board at least had that piece.
And
And
I
I think
had
it also
that-
provides
I had
protection
that
to a town
policy.
administrator that a change of one person, if it had happened, if it somehow we were a horribly divided board, which we are not, which is great, despite some 2-to-1 votes here and there, provide some protection, I think, to a town administrator too.
And that's why I
Yep.
am going by the document that
Yep.
I put together. That
Yep.
we voted on, I think, last year.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's it. You know, if your evaluations forms are due, Peg and Scott, Scott and Peg. By the 15th, how much time would you like? You want us to send you a form now? Do you want it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, especially if it's just especially if the form sort of already exists, it allows me
Yeah.
to write on it here and there over the next week or two as things occur to me and.
and do you have
Yeah.
a copy of that Form D?
The evaluation
Yeah.
form should be online.
Yeah,
Find it,
yeah,
send it
yeah.
along.
Sure, that'd be great.
It hasn't changed.
No.
No changes to it.
Because I find last year's my email somewhere, I'm sure.
I probably haven't, actually, I
No,
think I
we'll-
might
we can
even
get it
have one
out.
here somewhere. Oh, look at there.
Yeah.
All right, so that was all I was wanting to update you on in that. So we're moving on to board questions on the agendas. Liaison updates.
I'm fine for now.
I had a question over the weekend from a resident about when and how to dredge the pond for the fishing derby. Because I guess those poor fishies are only in about 3 feet of water. If they dredge it out, it might be more like 5.
The fire department's been there for the last couple of days. It's like between 5 and 6 feet right now.
Oh, is it? So are they all set then, do you think, or?
Well, the water level is between 5 and 6 feet, so they've been out there the last 2 days training. Southbound.
Oh.
Not dredging,
Not dredging.
training.
Okay,
Training, walking through.
I have the chief looking into that. He and I don't know how this has been done in the past. He was looking into it, but dredging typically requires some type of DEP approval.
For mosquito control.
well, then I can let this resident know.
Yeah, if you could give him, I just reached out to him, yeah, I think Saturday about it. So if you
Oh,
could give.
did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just waiting. He was looking into it
Okay.
to let me know. So I'll get you a response as soon as I have one.
All right, and if it's an email, then I can easily forward it.
I'll follow up on it.
And I don't know, when is the fishing derby usually?
The date is already out
It's
there.
already
Rex already put it out.
Yeah.
Is it April something?
Yeah.
It's April something,
Um,
yes.
So one thing on that, it's town-owned property. They need a vote of the select board.
They need to bring it to us.
No, all righty, I'm on them. Okay. Actually, I think they have a meeting this week, so it might be perfect timing. Okay.
Because they would need to fill out paperwork.
For an event.
Yeah, they have to co-sponsor it. Yep.
They should get in touch with our office as soon as possible.
I'm on
Is
it.
it Rec and someone else?
Well, Rec is co-sponsoring. I don't know if the person who was
Sure.
doing the majority of the donation before is still doing as much or if any, because I know that they're
Yep.
soliciting for donations to go buy the fish.
Yep.
And for the Boy Scouts to camp out the night before, so no one goes and scoops them all out.
And just to clarify on that, just like a road race or something that's on the roads, you are the supervisors of the roads as of town-owned property. So you would approve any of those types of events.
I kind of figured we would. I just didn't know how close it was to,
It's soon.
It's soon.
yeah,
It's like
Yeah.
4 weeks.
all right. Okay, if you could get that message to them.
You
that'd be
betcha.
great.
I'm on it.
All right, is there anything else? Oh, yes, there was something else. I was gonna mention it under the TA report. That I also had a resident this week who made me aware that there are still many school buses over at the mall, parked at the mall.
Mhm.
Are they on the
Right.
Marlboro side though?
No.
They have an agreement with the school buses. So, and we've looked into it on the tax side of it. So,
Because we used to tax them all for $29 or on bus or something like that. It used to be a revenue source for the town. Diane
It's the
Peterson made a point of it.
it's excise.
Excise, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excise
So
versus
I did have the assessor look into that.
And-
So as far as I know, we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. So the mall has an agreement with the bus company where they get some revenue for allowing the buses to park at the mall. So, and then they are housed on the Berlin side. So they are garaged on the Berlin side, and that's where the registration, I believe, comes from. So
And so has the excise tax for the buses been being paid to Berlin?
let me follow up on it. It was a little bit complicated the last time I asked because there's the town that it's owned in, the town it's garaged, and then there's something special about buses. So I'll get you a clear answer on it.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head what she said,
All
but
right,
she
I
did
just
look
wanna
into
pass
it.
along the correct information.
Yep.
So, yeah. Okay. That was all I had.
All right, ready?
Well, can we keep it quick?
Of course we can.
Because we're,
I know, and you're fading. All right, so energy, no meeting, because well, 2 out of 3 were on the voting thing, so that kind of killed that meeting. Concom, couple questions. They're on the warrant under Article 3 about free cash. Concom seemed to think that they were getting the full 50,000 back and not just the 27 with that, so I don't know if they're gonna come to you and talk to you, so you got a heads up on that?
Okay. My understanding is because the grant didn't fully refund that
Yep.
free cash, they get back part of it and
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Maplewood, there was, last week when they were doing, in anticipation of a lot of rain, they were doing some, draining of the basins, the watering basins, but, per DEP, I guess that was okay. So there you go. Highland Ridge, well, they were going up to do a check because according, to a report, there was some channeling forming in the, swales. And there's some recommending riprap that's supposed to go on. There's some reports that were due but have not come in, so Highland continues to be in the news. And another thing for you, heads up, Kristen, on the Verizon cell tower, they talked about it, and Concom is under the understanding that they will get a similar size parcel of land for the proposed cell tower. So-
what?
So the cell tower, right?
Which isn't on town meeting because they never took the vote they needed to make.
Okay, that's fine, but they were in discussion that if they're giving up like a 50 by 50-ish,
Uh-huh.
that they expect somewhere in town to get 50 by 50 back or to get compensated for that block.
No. So they have to take a vote that land is no longer needed for conservation purposes, and if they do not take that vote, then we cannot move forward.
They didn't take the vote last meeting
We're not required to give them a comparable space somewhere else.
because they did not vote.
No, but.
no. because
No,
it's
no.
not
Expects that
required.
if it went forward, which it doesn't sound like it's going to, there would be income that comes in that we've agreed to split with them 50-50, and so they will get 50% of the rent, which is the compensation for giving up the land.
Understood, but they're also looking for a parcel of land
Yeah.
to compensate for the parcel of
I
land.
think they're
that-
welcome to always look at tax title and suggest a land that they would like transferred over to.
Right.
I don't imagine that we're going to search around town for a 50-foot by 50-foot land to buy from a private landowner
Eh,
to give to conservation.
in principle, the idea of a swap doesn't work because it can't be that they need that land. That in order to give up that land, they need to not need it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, and then the rent was estimated more in the $20,000 range. So my understanding was they weren't moving forward for a variety of reasons. And obviously that would have to go out to RFP for a cell tower.
Mhm.
The interest came from Verizon, so I've already let Verizon know they were quite disappointed.
So it's dead.
Right. Conservation didn't take the required actions. to-
Unless they take it at some point, but Verizon is likely to move on because it's taking too long.
Okay. All right, let them know. Yeah, they were holding off their vote, until that, all right.
Until what?
until they figured out how they could get, that parcel
Another
of
piece
land.
Land?
Yep. Okay, all right, so because of no vote, it's dead. All right, that's the message I'll give, and
Okay.
I'll get in touch with, Rec. I do believe they're meeting on Thursday to talk, to tell them to giddy up and get the paperwork in for us. Dee, should I send them to you? For anything, for any questions that they have to co-sponsor? Is that okay? Okay, all right, done.
All right. So,
Did you get a chance, Scott? Did
Hmm?
you have? Oh, you did. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Mostly it was housing trust that we did at the beginning. So
okay, I would never forget him.
I'm sorry. I know.
All right, so we do have need for an executive session. The board will enter an executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exception 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or sale of real property, Berlin Memorial School lease. And Exception 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, police union, and return to open session after, only to adjourn the meeting. Keith, aye.
Hawkins, aye.
Stone Eye.
You need a second to that motion before you vote. Sorry.
Second.
Thank you.
Do we need to do it again?
Just vote now. Yeah.
Keith, aye.
Hawkins, aye.
Stone Eye.